Chapter 23. The next day, Rinpoche was woken up by an anxious caretaker Sure. Before he could even wake up. "What's the matter?" Rinpoche asked drowsily. "Was what you said last night true?" Caretaker Sure asked. "About the shaved ice shop? Of course it's true. How can I joke about this?" "That's it. Let's go out and see if there are any suitable shops." Caretaker Sure reached out and lifted Rinpoche up. "Brother Sure, just look around. As long as the location is good and there's a lot of traffic, the place doesn't have to be too big," Rinpoche said helplessly. Didn't he look for Caretaker Sure to work with him because he didn't want to do anything? After Caretaker Sure left excitedly, Rinpoche fell back onto the bed. Late in the morning, Rinpoche was woken up by a squeaking sound. He initially thought it was the chirping of birds, but when he opened his eyes, he realized it was actually the two little chaps. This was the first time Rinpoche knew pandas made such sounds. They sounded like birds. Looking at the empty bamboo basket at the side and the two little chaps gnawing on it, Rinpoche knew they were hungry. However, when he was about to put on his shoes and get down, he suddenly saw a few disgusting footprints on the ground. Two of them were stepped on by him when he came back last night, and a few were stepped on by Caretaker Sure in the morning. Rinpoche gritted his teeth as he walked out of the house. He found an odd-job worker and asked where the grass and meat were sent to the beast park last night. Indeed, there were 2 baskets of bamboo leaves there. Rinpoche carried one in each hand. It wasn't light, and it seemed to be stuffed to the brim. He went back and poured the bamboo leaves to one side. Then, he carefully cleaned up the floor full of excrement. He thought it was time to let the 2 little chaps out. After breakfast, he gave the 2 little chaps a bath since he had nothing to do. He spent a lot of effort and got himself drenched before he managed to wash them clean. In this world, people used a kind of plant fruit called bath beans to bathe. They were really beans. When bathing, they would be thrown into the water. After bathing, Rinpoche found a clean slate and placed the 2 little chaps on it. Not long after, they were completely dry. This time, he felt much more comfortable when he hugged the 2 little chaps again. The smell on his body had lessened significantly. Both of Gungun's front palms pressed against Rinpoche's face and pushed him back with all its might. He teased the 2 little fellows for a while before asking for some deer milk to feed the 2 panda cubs. Seeing the 2 panda cubs licking the food happily, he finally tasted the joy of raising pets. In the afternoon, he strolled around the beast park and looked at the familiar and strange animals. At night, Caretaker Sure came back. He pulled Rinpoche aside and said, "I still can't make up my mind. You have to follow me to take a look tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Rinpoche could only nod his head. The next morning, he was dragged out of the beast park by Caretaker Sure. It was better in the morning. It was not as hot as the day. This city was called Lan City. When Dayo was first founded, it was called Jilan. Later on, it was changed to Dayo. That was how the city got its name. The city was divided into 9 districts, which were the names of the first 9 strongholds: Behong, Bead Curtain, Shuaboping, Eagle Beak Cliff, Goklan Village, Wadayagu, Whitestone, Shuriulu. The first 6 districts were mainly residential districts, while the last 3 were commercial districts. Among them, Shurhu mainly sold various weapons, farming tools, and ironware. Shurhu mainly sold leather. Ualu sold herbs and animal bones. This was where Rinpoche and Caretaker Sure went to the beast park to buy food. Of course, there were many residences in these 3 districts. It was just that the shops were relatively concentrated. The place where the court officials lived was called Behong District. In addition, the street from the main city gate to Behong District was called Jinyuan Road. The best shops were actually on this street. Most of them were foreign merchants who sold all kinds of goods. There were also a few shops opened by locals. Caretaker Sure found 2 shops. One was located in Ualu, and the other was in Goklan Village. Caretaker Sure's wife and children lived here. Rinpoche accompanied them to take a look. The locations were all right, but not particularly good. However, shaved ice was currently the only thing in the market. He wasn't afraid of competition, so he could accept the slightly inferior locations. The most important thing was that these 2 shops weren't expensive. The total cost of each shop and the courtyard behind it was only slightly more than 10 silvers a year. Of course, this was according to Renbachien. Caretaker Shur's job was considered not bad. His monthly salary was only 6 taels. This shop alone cost Caretaker Shur 2 to half a month's salary. The 2 shops added up would cost him almost half a year's salary. There was also the hiring of people, so the expenses were even higher. No wonder he insisted on bringing Renbachien to take a look. After all, his salary was used to support his wife and children. After drinking a few mouthfuls of wine, he didn't have much left. This time, he listened to Renbachien and was prepared to bet his son's wife's savings. One of the 2 shops was occupied, but it was ready to leave. Renbachien followed Caretaker Shur and walked around the shop. It was about 50 to 60 square meters. Other than the counter, there were also a few tables for pedestrians to sit down, eat shaved ice, and rest. The courtyard behind the shop was slightly bigger than the shop. There was a small room for people to stay in and store things. "These 2 are fine," Renbachien said to Caretaker Shur after he finished walking around. "All right, this time I will bet everything I have." After hearing Renbachien's words, Caretaker Shur immediately made his decision. After that, the 2 of them walked around the streets and even enjoyed a street fight. Renbachien chose 2 more places. One of them was on Genuine Road. It had the highest flow of people. Of course, the rent was also expensive. It cost close to 100 taels of silver a year. "This is too expensive. If we sell shaved ice, we will almost lose money." Caretaker Shur saw that Renbachien was interested in the shop on Genuine Road, which was more than 100 square meters. "If we only sell shaved ice, we will lose money. How about selling ice?" Renbachien suddenly thought of an idea. "Selling ice? Will it work? Also, anyone can make shaved ice at a glance. It's just that they don't have ice. If we have ice, what will happen to our shaved ice shop? If we buy ice to make shaved ice, including the melted ice, we won't make any money. We'll do it then. Also, after the shaved ice is used up, we still have to heat it up. If we buy a piece of ice and install a fan at the side, it will simply be a simplified version of an air conditioner." "Yes, let's do that." Renbachien suddenly thought of an idea. They couldn't make an air conditioner now, but what about a simple fan? There was no need for an electric fan at all. All they had to do was install a bearing, a rubber ring, and a rope in the fan. Then they could pull the rope downwards and the fan would rotate accordingly. It looked similar to the yo-yos that could be seen all over the streets. However, this was much more energy efficient than using a fan. Furthermore, it was much cooler. Most importantly, this was something new. Many rich people would be interested in it. If they placed a basin of ice in front, it would definitely be a pleasure in such a hot place. Even if they didn't put ice in, they could still put a basin of water from a well. Haha, let me show you the technology from Earth. The more Renbachien thought about it, the more he felt that this idea was feasible. He patted Caretaker Shur and said, "This is it. I still have some money with me. Let's rent these 3 shops first. I will make something for you to see when we get back." Upon hearing that Renbachien wanted to invest money, Caretaker Shur repeatedly rejected him. "Brother Run, making ice is your idea. I can't let you invest money again. If you are confident, I will rent this shop even if I have to sell everything I have." Chapter 24. Renbachien turned around and saw a middle-aged man wearing a long gown with a mustache. He was not sure if he was from the Yun Nation or the Chun Nation or Great Xia. He was standing not far away from them with a smile on his face. It seemed like he had heard what Caretaker Shur said just now. Beside him, there were 2 other people who were much more muscular. They seemed to be bodyguards. Caretaker Shur took 2 steps forward and stood in front of that person. He was half a head taller than that person. "What are you laughing at?" Caretaker Shur's tone was filled with unfriendliness. It was as if he was ready to smack Renbachien's face if Renbachien did not agree with him. The 2 guards also took a step forward. Ever since Renbachien met Caretaker Shur, their relationship had always been very good. Therefore, other than Caretaker Shur's straightforwardness, Renbachien did not have any other feelings for him. At this moment, Renbachien realized that Caretaker Shur wasn't a kind soul. It might also have something to do with the fact that the other party was a foreigner. The people of Dayo didn't really like foreigners. In their opinion, Every foreigner who came to Dayo exuded an aura of greed from head to toe. It's nothing. It's just that when I heard what you said just now, I suddenly remember my past business. The middle-aged man said with a smile and took a step back. Even though he had just arrived in Lawn City, he already knew how to deal with Dayo people. Although this was a little cowardly, it would save him a lot of trouble. After all, he was a businessman who came to Dayo to seek wealth. Taking a step back was not a big deal. In his eyes, those greedy fellows who fought with the Dayo people were all fools. They thought that Dayo Nation needed the things that they brought, so they didn't dare to make a move against them. However, they didn't know that they had already placed their necks under the blades of others. However, he was somewhat curious about Rinpoche. It seemed like he wasn't from Dayo, but he had a good relationship with them. This was extremely rare. After listening to his words, Caretaker sure snorted heavily. Rinpoche stood there and looked at the shop and the crowd for a while. He realized that the person was still standing at the side and asked curiously, "Why aren't you leaving?" That person said with a smile, "Unfortunately, I also have my eyes on this shop. I'm here today to take it down." Rinpoche was elated. He had finally met his match. This shop seemed to be quite popular. If he didn't come out today, he wouldn't have anything to do with it. Looking at the middle-aged man's calm and unruffled appearance, Rinpoche reckoned that the owner of the shop would arrive soon. Since he had nothing to do, he might as well wait for a while. Not long after, a burly man came. Without saying a word, he put away the wooden board in front of the door, pushed the door open, and went in. The middle-aged man with a mustache smiled at Rinpoche and Gu Shijio before leading his men in. Rinpoche dragged Caretaker Shur into the shop to take a look at the situation inside. The shop was about 100 square meters in size, and the floor was paved with stone slabs. Behind the shop, there was a bigger yard with 2 rooms. As Rinpoche walked in and out of the shop, the burly man who opened the door was leaning against a pillar in a daze. "All right, no problem. Are you selling this shop?" The middle-aged man walked to the big man's side and asked with a smile. "Not for sale." The burly man stared at the ceiling and said, "That's good, but you have to sign a 3-year agreement. After that, you have to rent it to me first." "What kind of agreement is there to sign?" "We, the people of Dayo, never go back on our words." The burly man didn't seem to care about his words at all. It's always reassuring to have an agreement. After all, we set up this shop with the hope of stability. Are you afraid that we will go back on our words? The burly man stared at him fiercely and spat on the ground. "Pay up if you want to rent it. Otherwise, get lost." The middle-aged man smiled bitterly. The bad temper of the people of Dayo was really a headache. "How much is the rent for this shop?" Rinpoche interrupted and asked, "Aren't you guys together?" The burly man asked back. He sized up Rinpoche and Caretaker Shur. 150 taels a year. Rinpoche felt a toothache. Caretaker Shur only earned 6 taels of silver a month. This rent was equivalent to his salary for 2.5 years. Rinpoche still had more than 80 taels of silver, which was barely enough for half of the rent. However, Rinpoche immediately thought that he could earn money in the real world. 80 taels of silver was only slightly more than 10,000 yuan. 150 taels of silver was 30,000 yuan. Moreover, it was only for a year. In this case, the rent was really too cheap. In his city, with such a location and such a shop, it was impossible to rent it without 400,000 to 500,000 yuan a year. "All right, I will rent it." Rinpoche immediately said, "I will pay you the deposit today. I will send you the money 3 days later." If he took over this shop, not only could he sell ice, shaved ice, and clay fans, he could also sell the things he made in the future. This street was the best location. If he took over this shop, he would definitely be able to use it. Caretaker sure wanted to say something, but hesitated. He still looked very worried. "Little brother, you are not being loyal." The middle-aged man with the mustache smiled bitterly. "He who is quick gets it." Rinpoche laughed. The burly man said, "All right, I will wait for you for 3 days. Same time." The middle-aged man said, 160 taels a year. I can pay up now." The burly man rolled his eyes. "Let's talk in 3 days. If he doesn't bring the money, I will rent this shop to you." After finishing his sentence, He ignored the middle-aged man. It was unknown whether it was because Ren Bachien first said he wanted to rent the shop or because the words of the middle-aged man had infuriated him. Ren Bachien and caretaker Shur searched all over their bodies and collected 20 taels of silver. They passed it to the burly man and said, "I came out for a walk today, but I didn't bring enough money. I will definitely send it over at this time 3 days later." "All right. When the time comes, write a note and I will press my fingerprint on it," the burly man said. The few of them stood outside. The middle-aged man still felt that it was a pity. This location was really good. If he wanted to open a shop in Lawn City, this was the best location. Ren Bachien turned around and cupped his hands at the middle-aged man, bidding him farewell politely. Ren Bachien didn't have a bad impression of the middle-aged man. After all, every day he saw this burly man with arms that could race horses. Seeing this burly man who looked similar to him and wasn't annoying, Ren Bachien had a better impression of him. The middle-aged man with the mustache couldn't help but say to Ren Bachien, "Little brother, I don't know if I should say this. With 100 taels of silver, don't do a business that costs 70 taels of silver. If something goes wrong, you won't even have the chance to make a comeback. Furthermore, there are other problems such as cash flow. If you go back and think that the risk is too high, I am willing to pay you 30 taels of silver. You could still earn 10 taels of silver." Ren Bachien laughed. "You don't have to worry about this." After finishing his sentence, he pulled caretaker Shur away. "Boss, what should we do? Let's see if there are any other suitable shops. We will come back 3 days later." The middle-aged man said to the guard as he watched Ren Bachien's back disappear into the crowd. Now that they had bought the shop, the two of them didn't have the mood to continue shopping. On the way back, caretaker Shur was still a little worried. "Can we earn 150 taels of silver a year? It's too risky." "It's okay. I am renting this shop. When the time comes, I still need to sell some other things in this shop," Ren Bachien replied nonchalantly. With rations in hand, he didn't panic. Now, not only did he have rations, but he also had a lot of things that could be sold for money. Naturally, he wasn't worried at all. After returning home, he remembered that he wanted to go to the Chin medicine shop. As he was busy looking after the shop, he forgot about it. Chapter 25. Ren Bachien returned to the Beast Park. Her Majesty summoned him to the palace the next morning. This time, it wasn't the guard Shur who. It was someone he didn't know. He asked where Ren Bachien was, and Her Majesty summoned him. Ren Bachien was playing with Gun Gun. Gun Gun kept trying to break free from his arms. After seeing the person, Ren Bachien immediately went forward and said, "I'm Ren Bachien. May I know why Her Majesty summoned me?" "Just go. Why are you talking so much nonsense?" the guard said in a low and muffled voice. He entered the palace. It was the same palace as last time. Ren Bachien didn't know what the palace was for, but the Empress seemed to like it very much. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Ren Bachien was brought in and saw the Empress in red with her hair scattered behind her. She was leaning on the couch. The palace was very cool. After all, there were 2 basins of ice. "Come forward and talk. As for you, step down," the Empress said in a lazy voice. Ren Bachien took a few steps forward, lowered his head slightly, and waited for the Empress to speak. "Previously, you said that you can produce 5,000 caddies of grain per moo. Is this true or false?" the Empress asked. Ren Bachien's heart skipped a beat. The last time he said this, the Empress didn't react at all. Later on, he asked caretaker Shur and found out that Dayo was actually very short of grain. He had been guessing what was going on all this time. Now that the Empress finally asked, he immediately told her in full detail. "This thing is called a sweet potato, also known as a sweet potato. It can produce about 5,000 caddies per moo, depending on the condition of the field. However, it will definitely produce 5 to 6,000 caddies per moo. Furthermore, this thing has an advantage. It has very low requirements on the field. It can be grown on plains and mountains. Dayo doesn't have many plains. Planting this thing should solve most of the food shortage." The Empress sat up straight when she heard this. "Is what you said true?" the Empress asked in a deep voice. "Absolutely true, without any falsehood." Ren Bachien lowered his head and answered, "Where can I find this sweet potato?" "Your Majesty, give me an acre of land near the Beast Park. I can cultivate and plant it. I can see the results in 4 months. Rinpoche didn't dare to say that he didn't have any sweet potatoes on hand. He could only get them in 2 days. It would be too easy for him to make a mistake. Hence, he used ambiguous words. I agree to this. I will wait for a few months to see if I can really produce 5 to 6,000 to 10,000 caddies per moo. If you succeed, you will be rewarded with a great merit. You can ask me for anything you want. If it doesn't work out, you should know the consequences of lying to me, the Empress said slowly. Don't worry, Your Majesty. I definitely won't risk my head, Rinpoche said. The Empress nodded and said, that would be for the best. Having said that, he lay back down on the bed and said, you said you can tell stories? Take a few steps forward and tell us. Yes. Rinpoche took a few steps forward and got a clearer look at the Empress. Her pair of phoenix eyes were slightly squinted, and the expression on her face was very calm. Her face, which was originally full of heroic spirit, looked a little softer at this moment. The red clothes outlined her body, showing off her curves perfectly. Rinpoche glanced at her, lowered his head, and started to think hard about what story to tell. Journey to the West. This was his favorite, but it seemed like he couldn't say it. The Empress wouldn't like a monkey that wreaked havoc in heaven, would she? Water margin? A group of rebellious bandits was even more out of the question. He had never read Dream of the Red Chamber. It seemed like he could only tell about the 3 kingdoms. This was the only one that left a deep impression on him. He had also watched the TV series a few times. Even though he couldn't remember the original text, he could still tell it in the vernacular. Other than the 4 great classical novels, he could only tell about the legend of the White Snake and Liang Shanbua and Zhuang Tai. He couldn't remember the rest. After deciding to tell the Empress about the romance of the 3 kingdoms, Rinpoche cleared his throat and said, Your Majesty, then I will tell you a story that happened during the Han Dynasty in ancient China. The surging Yangtze River flows east. The waves wash away all heroes. Whether it's success or failure, it's all gone. The Green Mountains are still there, and the sunset glow a few times. The white-haired fisherman and woodcutter are used to watching the autumn moon and the spring breeze. A pot of muddy wine is a happy reunion. How many things have happened since ancient times? They're all a joke. After reciting a poem called Lin Jiang Xian, the Empress said, even though it sounds good, it's a little lethargic. Rinpoche laughed dryly, then continued to tell the first chapter. The 3 heroes of the Peach Garden swore brotherhood and beheaded the yellow-turbaned hero. From time to time, the Empress asked Rinpoche about the names of some people, such as the 10 imperial attendants, Zhang Xian, Lu Ji, Gong Sunzan, and so on. When Rinpoche was explaining, the Empress heard the word eunuch and commented, I heard that there are eunuchs in the Great Xia Imperial Palace. However, to trample on his own people like this, he is unworthy of being the ruler of a nation. When talking about Empress Dowager He and Empress Dowager Dong, the Empress was rather puzzled and asked, why can't women participate in politics? In ancient China, women weren't allowed to participate in politics. If anyone has any objections, just behead them until no one speaks, the Empress said disdainfully. Rinpoche thought about it and felt that what she said made sense. Moreover, there was really someone who did this and succeeded. It seemed that this person definitely had a common language with Wu Zetian. After the Empress finished her lunch, Rinpoche drank some water and continued to tell the story. At first, the Empress would occasionally interrupt, but gradually, she stopped talking and focused on listening to Rinpoche's story. In one day, Rinpoche told the story 11 times, all the way until Liu Bei saved Kong Rong and Lu Bu defeated Cao Cao. At the end of the day, he talked until his mouth was dry, but his spirits were very high. In the past, he had always liked the 3 kingdoms, but he rarely discussed it with others. Now that he met someone who had never heard of this story, he finally had the leeway to express it. The more he talked, the more excited he became. His spirits were getting higher and higher, and he was getting more and more engrossed. Towards the end, he even began to pace back and forth, occasionally gesturing with his hands. The Empress didn't mind. Watching his gesticulating performance was rather interesting, and the corner of her mouth curled up slightly. Unfortunately, Rinpoche was immersed in the world of romance of the three kingdoms and didn't notice. The two palace maids at the side didn't have the Empress's various thoughts and comments. They were extremely engrossed in the story. As the story progressed, they would gnash their teeth and smile happily. When the sky turned dark, Rinpoche noticed the color of the sky outside and stopped talking. The Empress said that it was rather interesting and asked Rinpoche to go back and continue the rest of the story tomorrow. When Rinpoche heard this, he was going back to reality tonight. Where'd he find the time to explain to the Empress? He hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, I have to prepare for planting tomorrow and clear a piece of land. After all, food is the foundation of a nation. Having sufficient food and not relying on those merchants is the top priority." The Empress looked at him with interest and said, "What you said makes sense. The people's livelihood is an important matter. Let's leave it at that. Go back and prepare that sweet potato first. Come back and tell me the rest of the story after you are done. Don't forget that you still have an appointment with my imperial kitchen." The two palace maids looked at Rinpoche with some regret. They were just about to get to the part that made them anxious. Chapter 26. When he woke up, Rinpoche had already returned to his newly rented bedroom. He walked around upstairs and downstairs. He was the only one there, and it felt a little lonely. It couldn't be compared to the liveliness on the other side. Although he wasn't short of money for the time being, and living on this side was more comfortable, he had a greater sense of existence on the other side. This was because he was unique there. On Earth, he was just one of the masses and didn't stand out in any way. As he lamented, he charged his phone. He switched on the computer. The 34-inch monitor was much better than his original 21-inch monitor. After watching a movie, he switched on his phone and saw that there were 2 missed calls. His former colleagues had all become passers-by. Both of these missed calls were from Chen. After thinking about it, Rinpoche wasn't in a hurry to return the call. It was such a coincidence that it happened to be 10 days each time. After going downstairs for breakfast, Rinpoche came back and switched on his computer to check on the planting of sweet potatoes. After reading it once, he had a rough idea of what to do. He drove to the supermarket to buy more than 10 kilograms of sweet potatoes, beer, snacks, and the like before returning home. Just as he opened the door, Rinpoche heard voices in the house. "Thief!" This thought flashed through Rinpoche's mind. He immediately remembered that it should be the housekeeper. The person inside also heard the sound of the door opening. The voice stopped abruptly. Then, a girl in her 20s wearing an apron peeked in and quickly retracted her head. "Someone's here." "Auntie, is this the owner of the house?" Rinpoche vaguely heard this voice. Following that, a middle-aged woman came out. When she saw Rinpoche, she smiled and said, "Mr. Rin, you are back." Rinpoche had seen her at the housekeeping company before, but only once. "Yes, I am back. You guys continue with your work. Don't worry about me." Rinpoche smiled. He wasn't used to being addressed as Mr. just now, but it felt pretty good. He placed the things beside the sofa in the living room, lay on the sofa, and switched on the television. It was a new period drama, but Rinpoche's mind wasn't on the screen. In one moment, he was thinking about the black mud cream. In the next moment, he was thinking about the other world. In the next moment, he was thinking about the romance of the three kingdoms. Suddenly, he thought about the fan and the shop. He hurriedly went out and drove around. First, he looked for a private jewelry shop. "Do you have money?" "Yes, what do you want?" "A necklace or a ring? Just buy some silver and melt it into small pieces." After Rinpoche finished speaking, that person was obviously not interested anymore. But he still asked how much. Rinpoche did some calculations. Silver wasn't expensive on Earth, but its purchasing power was still acceptable in that world. Originally, 80 taels was enough for 4,000 grams, but it was not a bad idea to buy more. 50 kilograms of silver Rinpoche was. 50 jin was 500 taels. 25,000 grams was only 100,000 yuan. Rinpoche, Rin said. From Rin. At this time, after deducting the money for renting a house, buying a car, and transferring money to his mother, he still had 700,000 to 800,000 yuan in his bank card. He didn't care about this money much. When the boss heard 50 caddies, he immediately became more enthusiastic. 50 caddies of silver was equivalent to 25 kilograms. Even if he earned a little less, it was still a sum of money. Ren, although he able. There, he money. I botchian, being. Ren, botchian, was, on of, being I on. He, Ren botchian paid the deposit and got the receipt. He agreed to melt the silver into small pieces and collect it 2 days later. Then, he bought a yo-yo and a hand-crank fan to study. He wanted to see how he could make a reliable fan under such simple conditions. When he returned, the 2 housekeepers had already left. The house was clean and tidy. Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. He took out the yo-yo and the hand-crank fan and disassembled them to see how to make a fan. After studying for a few hours, he had a rough idea. He just had to find someone to make it and see if it was as he expected. The next day, Rinpoche sat in front of the computer and read the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. He recalled some of the blurry scenes. On the 3rd day, he called Chen Qing. "Did you go into seclusion again?" Chen Qing asked the moment he picked up the call. "It's about the formula for the black mud cream. That person lives in a remote place in the mountains. I called you back as soon as I got back." Rinpoche apologized. However, he knew in his heart that he wouldn't be able to contact Chen Qing so frequently in the future. This was because his days in that world were too stable. Every time, he would stay in this world for 3 days and then disappear for 9 days. "How is it? Did you get the formula?" Chen Qing asked. "Not yet, but soon. Let's go out to have some fun tonight. Let's have dinner. I won't be going to the bar." Rinpoche shook his head. After arranging a time with Chen Qing, he searched for herbs on the internet for a few hours and prepared to exchange them for the black mud cream. Since ordinary people had never seen snow in that world, Rinpoche guessed that it was subtropical. Rinpoche then searched for a few herbs that appeared frequently and were difficult to cure. He memorized them. Then he went to buy a bunch of spices: Sichuan pepper, Chinese anise, sesame, cumin, cinnamon, monosodium glutamate, and 13 spices. He bought a big bag of them. He also specially bought the seeds of Sichuan pepper, Chinese anise, fennel, and cinnamon to plant them in that world. As for the sesame and cumin, they were the seeds. Although Chinese anise was the same, the one sold in the market had been treated and could no longer germinate and grow. With these ingredients, Rinpoche should be able to make delicious food with a similar taste in that world. After loading the ingredients into the car, he went to collect the silver. 50 kilograms was a lot, and all of it was melted into 2 or 3 taels of silver. Rinpoche did not have time to check the purity of the silver. He paid immediately and carried the silver into the car. Rinpoche then headed to the restaurant where he had arranged to meet Chen Qing. After waiting in the car for a long time and playing with his phone for a while, someone knocked on the car window. He turned around and saw Chen Qing waving his hand at him. Rinpoche got out of the car and was about to speak when he was stunned. There was a woman beside Chen Qing. This was very normal. Chen Qing often had different women around him, and he had also invited Rinpoche to dinner. So far, other than Jiang Nan, Rinpoche had not seen any other woman appear for a second time. However, this woman surprised Rinpoche. It was actually his university classmate, Dong Haiqing. When Dong Haiqing saw Rinpoche, her mouth was agape, and her expression was obviously very surprised. "You two know each other?" Chen Qing noticed their expressions and asked with a smile. "Yes, we are classmates," Rinpoche replied with a smile. During the heavy snowfall, Dong Haiqing had always been the target of many guys and attracted a lot of attention. On the other hand, Rinpoche was a passerby that no one paid attention to. During their 4 years in university, the number of words they had exchanged did not exceed 1 hand. They had never interacted before. Rinpoche was just surprised that it was such a coincidence. On the other hand, Dong Haiqing was even more surprised than him. The reason why she could remember Rinpoche was because when they were in school, there was a girl who seemed to have a crush on Rinpoche. After she found out about it, she said, "He doesn't have money, he doesn't have good looks, and he doesn't have a personality. Why did you find someone like him?" After that, there was naturally no more after that. Even though Rin Baqian did not know about this, she still remembered it. Because of that incident, she had paid attention to Rin Baqian for a period of time. The impression that he left on her was only one word: ordinary, even more ordinary than ordinary. It was a waste for the girl who shared the same bed to be matched with such a person. Therefore, when she saw that Chun Qing's friend was actually Rin Baqian, she was naturally very surprised. Rin Baqian looked the same as when he was in school. There was not much change. His appearance was considered delicate and pretty, and he only had short stubble on his head. He was dressed very ordinarily, and his total value might not even exceed 300 yuan. However, he was driving an Audi A6L, which was worth at least 500,000 to 600,000 yuan. Furthermore, he was actually good friends with Chun Qing. She did not know much about Chun Qing. She only knew that he was a rich second generation and his family was extremely wealthy. However, Rin Baqian was good friends with him. Furthermore, he was driving such a car. Presumably, he was not simple, right? Right now, there was only one thought in Dong Haiqing's mind. She had misjudged him in the past. Chapter 27. Why are you in Shin City? Rin Baqian asked curiously. I'm working here now, Dong Haiqing said with a smile. I didn't know you were here. All right, let's continue our small talk later. Let's go in first. Chun Qing placed one hand on Dong Haiqing's waist and the other on Rin Baqian's back. After the few of them entered the room and ordered, Dong Haiqing asked, Where are you working now? Squatting at home. Rin Baqian answered casually. Dong Haiqing smiled. I'm so envious of your freedom. If he could stay at home, drive a good car, and go in and out of a high-end hotel without a change in expression, then his family must be rich. It was just as he had guessed. There are still a few university classmates in Shenzhen. Do you want to join us for a gathering? It depends on the situation. I often go to other places, Rin Baqian replied. Moreover, he wasn't interested in the reunion at all. He had no contact with any of his former classmates. I'll contact you when the time comes. You can go if you have time. Dong Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled. His attitude was friendly, completely different from when he was in school. If he was treated like this by Dong Haiqing in school, he might be happy for a while and even fantasize about it. But after being in society for a year, he clearly knew what the reason was. Do you remember Chun Bing? Dong Haiqing asked again. Rin Baqian thought about it and had some impression of her. She was a petite and exquisite young lady. She was pretty, but her legs were a little short. Sitting on the chair, he looked like he was 1.65 meters tall, but in reality, he was only 1.58 meters tall. He nodded. She had a good impression of you back then. Dong Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled. Rin Baqian was slightly surprised. This was the first time he had heard of this. But after that, you didn't do anything, and she wasn't a proactive person, so was left unsettled. She's also in Shun City now, Dong Haiqing said. However, the truth was that Chun Bing had once thought of taking the initiative. But after hearing what she said, she finally gave up. If he could bring Chun Bing and Rin Baqian together, it would be beneficial to him. After all, she didn't have much confidence in dealing with this rich second-generation heir. But his height, appearance, and background were all in line with her expectations. Since she wasn't confident, she might as well take the side route through Rin Baqian. It might be beneficial. Even if there weren't any benefits, Rin Baqian and Chun Bing would still remember his kindness, right? Rin Baqian could also be of help to her. If Rin Baqian knew what Dong Haiqing was thinking, he would definitely be shocked to think that they even had ideas about him. Moreover, it had only been a year since he entered society, and he had turned a dazzling figure in the eyes of many people in the ivory tower into such a state. After exchanging phone numbers with Rin Baqian, Dong Haiqing shifted her attention back to Chun Qing. Rin Baqian heaved a sigh of relief. He did not have much of an impression of Chun Bing. If she really wanted to matchmake the two of them, Rin Baqian would have a headache. After all, he wasn't good at rejecting people. After that, Rin Baqian spent most of his time listening to Chun Qing and Dong Haiqing's conversation. Occasionally, he would interrupt them. With Dong Haiqing around, it was inconvenient for the two of them to talk about many things, so they just had a simple chat. After leaving the restaurant, Ren Baqian rejected Chun Qing's suggestion to go to the bar for a drink. He watched as the two of them got into Chun Qing's car and drove home. He placed the silver, spices, and sweet potatoes in a bag and placed them on the bed. Ren Baqian had only been online for a while before he hugged the bag and lay down. He was afraid that he would move his arms when he fell asleep and leave something behind. These are things that he would need when he returned. He needed the silver to rent the shop. The spices were related to the bet with the Imperial Kitchen, and the sweet potatoes were even more important. When he returned, he would find someone to cut them into small pieces and plant them on a plot of land. After lying down for a long time, Ren Baqian could no longer open his eyes. In a daze, he felt the scene before him change. He was already in a room in the Beast Park. Squeaking sounds could be heard from outside the door. It was a pitiful sound. Ren Baqian changed his clothes and opened the door. The two pandas immediately hugged his legs and refused to let go. Furthermore, they were squeaking nonstop. What's wrong? Ren Baqian was at a loss at first. When he saw that the bamboo leaves in the basket were long gone and the floor was covered with feces, he immediately guessed that the two of them were hungry and thirsty. He had been gone for a day, and no one cared about these two little ones. The bamboo leaves had long been eaten, and no one fed them water. No wonder they were so pitiful. When he thought of this, Ren Baqian hurriedly went to a nearby place to fetch a bucket of water. Before he poured it into the basin, the two pandas leaned on the bucket and started to drink. The weather here was so hot, and no one took care of them for a day. It seemed like the two little ones were thirsty. Ren Baqian poured a basin of water and ran to the warehouse where the animal food was stored in the Beast Park. He took a big basket of bamboo leaves and came back. Seeing that the two little ones did not care about him and dived into the basket, Ren Baqian stroked their heads. Fortunately, he had only been gone for a day. If he was gone for 3 days, it would be troublesome. It seemed like he had to find someone to take care of these two little ones. After a sleepless night, Ren Baqian saw that the sky was still dark and estimated that it was around 2 in the morning. He returned to his room and stuffed everything under his bed. Then, he lay on his bed and slept again. Early in the morning, he was woken up by Caretaker Shur. Caretaker Shur's loud voice reverberated in Ren Baqian's ears. "Where did you go yesterday? I have been looking for you for the whole day." "What's the matter?" Ren Baqian struggled to open his eyes. He had a sleepy look on his face. "Her Majesty instructed me to clear a piece of land for you in the Beast Park. Also, I have gathered 70 taels of silver for rent. We have to go in a while. Otherwise, the 20 taels of silver will go down the drain." Caretaker Shur immediately lifted Ren Baqian up from the bed. Ren Baqian was 175 meters tall, but in Caretaker Shur's hands, he looked like a child. This time, Ren Baqian immediately woke up. He helplessly said, "Wait for me, I will be done in a while." When Ren Baqian was putting on his clothes, Caretaker Shur was still curious. "Why are you still wearing a loincloth on this day?" Ren Baqian thought for a while before realizing that Caretaker Shur was talking about his underwear. He quickly pulled up his pants and looked at Caretaker Shur speechlessly. "You don't wear a loincloth? It's too hot. It's better to wear something cool," Caretaker Shur replied naturally. Ren Baqian cupped his hands. He had nothing in common with Caretaker Shur. When he went out, it was already getting late. It was at least 7 or 8 in the morning. People in this world slept early and woke up early. They slept at 7 or 8 in the evening and woke up at 5 or 6 in the morning. He went to the kitchen to look for something to eat. When the cook saw Ren Baqian, a smile appeared on his face. "Caretaker Ren, where are you going to teach me?" "In another 2 days." Ren Baqian waved his hand. He did not have time for these 2 days. He took some dry rations made from an unknown variety of coarse grains and a bowl of vegetable soup. After finishing it, he returned to his room to take some money and followed Caretaker Shur to the rental shop. "I have bet all my assets and even borrowed some money," Caretaker Shur said painfully on the way. "Actually, I can pay for the shop myself," Ren Baqian said. "Forget it. I have already taken advantage of you. I can't let you take on such a huge risk. Anyway, I can just throw in all the money earned from the other 2 shops. I reckon it won't make a loss." Ren Baqian smiled. Caretaker Shur was indeed a good person. However, he was also a good person. That shop would definitely not make a loss in the future. Just as the two of them arrived, they heard someone say, "Little brother, you are here." He turned his head and saw the mustached, middle-aged man from the other day. Rinpochian cupped his hands. "I have already given you the money. Naturally, I have to come." The middle-aged man smiled bitterly. "It seems that you have made up your mind. I shall take my leave now." Chapter 28. The two of them didn't have to wait long before the burly man arrived at the door. He nodded at the two of them and turned to open the door. Rinpochian passed the cloth bag he was carrying to that person. Inside the bag was the 130 taels of silver that he and caretaker Sure had pooled together. It was indeed a little tiring to carry something that weighed more than 10 kilograms for almost an hour. After checking, the man nodded at the two of them and finally revealed a smile. Caretaker Sure took out the strips of paper and red clay that he had prepared beforehand. The man took a look at them and pressed his fingerprint on them. From now on, this shop would belong to Rinpochian and caretaker Sure for a year. "How should I address you? Where can I find you if there's anything?" Rinpochian asked with a smile after seeing him press his fingerprint. "Jindong General's residence. I have something to discuss with caretaker Shi," the man said to Rinpochian and tossed the key over. After he left, caretaker Sure said, "So it's the property of General Jindong." Rinpochian had no idea about the court officials of Dayo. However, there was one thing he remembered. Those who could become generals were all capable of fighting. To be able to sit in the position of General of the East, one had to be able to fight. "What rank is the East vanquishing general?" Rinpochian asked curiously. Dayo's official ranks were modeled after Great Xia's, which was a 9-rank system. Primary grade 2. Caretaker Sure gestured with his fingers. "Brother Sure, what level are you at?" "9th class minor class." "Then, as a steward, I can't even be considered as a minor 9th rank steward. Dayo is the same as Great Xia. There are 9 ranks in the system, and there are 18 ranks in total. Yours is called unattainable," caretaker Sure explained. Rinpochian smacked his lips. In the past, he had never even been a class monitor. Now, at least he had 10 subordinates. Moreover, he had so many good things in his hands. No matter what, he would be able to get an official position. Dayo respected martial arts. If he brought the ancient military books over, would he be able to fool a few people? "What do you think? What should we do next?" Caretaker Sure asked. "Recruit people. Set up this place first." "Brother Sure, don't you hate the people of the Yun Nation? In the future, the people of Dayo and the people of the Yun Nation will have one price." "Hell, let's do as you say." Caretaker Sure was elated when he heard this. "Everything else is easy, and it's easy to make. You can add more flavors, and you can make any kind of fruit. Try not to leak the information about making ice with saltpeter," Rinpochian warned. The matter of saltpeter could not be concealed, but the longer it could be concealed, the longer it could be used. Once the streets were filled with them, they wouldn't be able to make money anymore. "Understood. This matter is definitely not bad." Caretaker Sure patted his chest and said. After the two of them walked around the room, Rinpochian gave them some ideas. They would set up a bar counter in the corner, a row of benches at the side, and tables and chairs in the other empty spaces. This way, people who came to buy shaved ice could sit here and eat, or they could sit down and rest for a while, waiting to take it away. There was nothing else. "Brother Sure, we can also sell ice. A piece of shaved ice costs 5 copper coins, and a piece of ice the size of the one we use for storage can be sold for 30 copper coins." "All right, the people of Yun Nation will double." After the two of them settled the matter, they left the shop and went straight to the Chun medicine shop that they saw last time. The shop wasn't considered big, but there were quite a lot of people. At the entrance, they saw a few aborigines going in and out. Some of them were injured, and some seemed to be sick. There was a middle-aged man sitting in the shop, and there were 3 to 4 helpers. "Are you the boss?" Rinpochian stood at the side and asked after the man finished prescribing medicine. "What's the matter?" The man raised his head and took a glance at Rinpochian. He then ignored him and shouted, "Next! I have a business transaction to discuss with you. I only treat patients here. I don't do any other business. It's a business related to treating patients. Rinpochian wasn't anxious at all. After the middle-aged man saw another two patients and saw that there was no one waiting behind him, he raised his head and said to Rinpochian, "What's the matter? Speak. I want to use my medicine prescription to exchange for your prescription. My prescription can save a large number of patients suffering from tetanus, which is also known as chi-chi." After hearing Rinpochian's words, the middle-aged man's face became a lot more solemn. He said to the two of them, "Come in with me, let's talk inside." There were 2 chairs and a table in the inner room. The middle-aged man first gestured to the two of them, then he sat on a chair. "How do I address you?" The middle-aged man asked casually. "My surname is Run. Rinpochian, the person beside me, is my companion. May I know how to address you?" Rinpochian asked. Up until now, he still didn't know caretaker Shi's name and called him Brother Shi every day. "My surname is Chun Zixing. Now tell me, what kind of prescription do you want to exchange for?" Chun Zixing asked. "The black mud cream." After Rinpochian finished speaking, he stared at Chun Zixing attentively. As long as the other party was willing to exchange, Rinpochian would definitely give him something that would satisfy him. He was just afraid that the other party wouldn't be willing to exchange. That would be troublesome. Chun Zixing muttered to himself for a while and said, "The black mud cream is passed down from generation to generation in my Chin family. Although the production isn't high, its effects are amazing. However, medicine is used to treat people. It's not impossible to exchange with you, but the thing you are offering must have a corresponding value. Furthermore, it can't be the kind that is circulated everywhere." After hearing Chun Zixing's words, Rinpochian was instantly elated. As long as you're willing to exchange, anything is fine. There were so many kinds of medicine in the modern world, including Chinese and Western medicine. There were also various medical treatments that exceeded Chun Zixing's imagination. There must be something that he was willing to exchange. In any case, Rinpochian didn't feel any heartache for selling his father's farm. "Tell me what I can offer." Penicillin can be used as an antibiotic to treat many diseases, including chirin. When people fall sick, it is caused by bacterial invasion and inflammation. The main symptoms are redness, swelling, heat, pain, and dysfunction. The most obvious symptom is inflammation of the wound. Secondly, tonsillitis or throat, coughing, pneumonia, and bronchitis are all effective. The most important thing is to treat the wound, as well as women giving birth. It can greatly reduce the chances of inflammation and chirin. This medicine isn't difficult to produce, takes a short time to produce, and can be widely used. Other than me, no one else knows about it. I think its value shouldn't be any lower than the black mud cream. After Rinpochian finished speaking, Chun Zixing first asked a few questions about the diseases that Rinpochian mentioned. After all, he didn't understand many of the terms that Rinpochian mentioned. However, after combining his many years of medical experience and asking Rinpochian about the parts that he didn't understand, he understood everything. There is no doubt that the medicine that Rinpochian mentioned was valuable. The effect of the black mud cream was indeed good, but its greatest value lay in the fact that the so-called chirin would not appear during an extreme period. In his eyes, the length of the recovery process was secondary. After all, he was a doctor and not a businessman. The disadvantages of the black mud cream were also very obvious. The raw materials were scarce, the price was high, and it couldn't be widely used. A large number of patients who couldn't afford the black mud cream would either die or have their limbs amputated due to infection and chirin. The medicine that Rinpochian mentioned was the most important point of the black mud cream. In Chun Zixing's eyes, it was easy to produce, the raw materials were cheap, and it could be widely used. Chun Zixing pondered for a long time and asked, "How difficult is it to produce this medicine?" "It's not difficult. I can teach you the entire set of cultivation, separation, and manufacturing methods of penicillin. If what you said is true, I can exchange the formula with you." Chun Zixing nodded his head. Chapter 29. Prepare some fruits first and put them in a place. After a period of time, when the fruits have rotted and become moldy, collect the layer of green mold on them. After that, I will tell you the extraction method, Rinpoche said. Sure. The penicillin you mentioned is the hair that grows after the fruits have rotted? Chen Zixing asked. Without waiting for Rinpoche's reply, he asked another question. The terminology you mentioned just now is different from what I know. I have never heard of it. Where did you learn it from? This is a medical technique from the distant West. We call it Western medicine, Rinpoche said. If you want to learn, I can show you 2 Western medicine books. Upon hearing this, Chen Zixing was overjoyed. He stood up from his chair and cupped his hands towards Rinpoche. Thank you, brother. Rinpoche waved his hand. He hesitated for a while and was about to tell Chen Zixing about another matter. Typhoid fever was a very troublesome disease in ancient times. It had the highest mortality rate. Even in modern times, many people died every year because they didn't receive treatment in time. In modern times, chloramphenicol was the main treatment for typhoid fever. However, it was difficult to produce because of the lack of resources. Rinpoche was prepared to exchange for penicillin and treatise on typhoid and miscellaneous diseases if he didn't have enough penicillin. However, now that penicillin could be exchanged for the formula for the black mud cream, there was no use for him to keep these 2 medical books. The Chen Medicine Hall had always had a good reputation. It treated commoners at a low price and had a high reputation in Lan City. Rinpoche was prepared to give these 2 books to Chen Zixing. It could be considered as doing a good deed for this world. Rinpoche thought to himself, I will bring these 2 medical books the next time I come here. What was more troublesome was that the language here was the same as Chinese, but the words were different. He probably had to read them to Chen Zixing. We'll take our leave then. I will come back in 4 to 5 days after I have prepared the things. Rinpoche stood up and left. Chen Zixing sent the 2 of them to the door. You could treat typhoid fever. Caretaker sure asked Rinpoche after he left. There is indeed a way to treat it. Rinpoche nodded. Caretaker sure sighed. It would be great if you came 10 years earlier. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche knew that Chen Zixing's relatives and friends had passed away because of this disease. But how old was I 10 years ago? At that time, I didn't understand anything. Caretaker sure squeezed out a smile. That's true. It's not too late to come. After that, Caretaker sure lost interest in talking. After that, Rinpoche made a trip to the blacksmith shop where he made the box previously. He ordered a few fan blades and bearings to make an indigenous fan. He drew what he wanted on the map and gave it to the other party. The boss immediately said, This is simple. Come back to collect it in 2 days. After finishing his meal, he returned to the Beast Park and went to the ice house to take a look. Nominally, he was in charge of this ice cellar, but why did he not come here more than a few times? Fortunately, the odd job workers arranged by Caretaker Sure were very efficient, which saved him a lot of trouble. Now that the ice cellar was full, they were resting. Rinpoche waved his hand and said, Everyone, put a piece of ice under your bed at night and have a good sleep. Anyway, as long as the ice cellar was full, it would be fine. If there were more, he might as well make the best use of it. Thank you very much, Caretaker Run. The 10 of them chuckled. This was a good thing for them. After taking a stroll around the ice cellar, Rinpoche saw that they had nothing to do, so he called a few of them to follow him back to prepare seedlings for the sweet potatoes. When he returned, he saw 2 panda cubs lying in the shade. They looked so hot that they were unwilling to get up. Rinpoche fetched a basin of water, lifted the 2 little chaps, and threw them into the basin. The 2 little chaps immediately crawled out of the basin while groaning. It seemed like they did not like soaking in the basin of water. After walking 1 round on the ground, they were covered in mud. When Rinpoche saw that the 2 little chaps wanted to rub against his body, he quickly took 2 steps away. Tian Tian and Gun Gun groaned as they crawled back to the shade and continued to stay there. Not long after, their fur was dry. This time, the 2 little chaps shook their heads and crawled back into the basin to wet their fur before coming out again. Rinpoche had to admit that these 2 little chaps were quite smart. Caretaker Run. This flower bear's meat is not tasty. It's useless to keep it. The one who spoke was called Tung Dilong. He was very strong and honest. However, the moment he opened his mouth, he mentioned that the meat was not tasty. Rinpoche felt like giving him a kick. In your eyes, This panda has no other use other than being eaten, right? I'm keeping it for fun. Ren Bachien casually said, in the future, when I'm not in the beast park, look after these two chaps. Feed them some water and bamboo leaves. You all know where to get the bamboo leaves, right? Understood. Caretaker Run, don't worry, the few of them replied. Ren Bachien then pulled out the bag containing the sweet potatoes from under the bed. He guided them bit by bit. First, he cut the sweet potatoes into small pieces and hung them on a wooden stick. Then, he filled a basin with water and placed the wooden stick on top of the basin. He ensured that half of the sweet potatoes were submerged in water and the other half was exposed. This way, after the sweet potatoes germinated, they could be used for planting. After he finished teaching them these things, someone from the palace came to call Ren Bachien into the palace. This time, it was Sure who came. He pulled Ren Bachien aside and asked, I heard that you made a bet with the people from the Imperial Kitchen. You can say so. I mainly wanted to broaden their horizons, Ren Bachien said happily. He turned around and pulled out the bag from under the bed. He took out a small bag of every kind of seasoning, wrapped them in cloth, and carried them away. These are the things you prepared. Sure who asked curiously as he looked at Ren Bachien packing the small bags of seasoning. He had heard about the incident with the Imperial Kitchen. Logically speaking, the Imperial Kitchen had the best chefs in the country. What they said should be right. However, Ren Bachien appeared out of thin air in the army that day and was able to make ice on such a hot day. Sure who felt that Ren Bachien was rather mysterious and felt that Ren Bachien had a higher chance of winning. Now that he saw Ren Bachien packing so many things, he knew that these were Ren Bachien's preparations. When they arrived at the Imperial Kitchen and saw that Ren Bachien had arrived, everyone stood up. Previously, when Ren Bachien made the bet, everyone was present. These people had been waiting to teach Ren Bachien a lesson for a few days. Finally, the day had arrived. Caretaker Run, take out the seasoning that you mentioned. If you don't have it, don't blame me for breaking your legs and hanging them on the city wall. Caretaker Go had a fierce look on his face and spoke with a fierce tone. He really didn't believe that Ren Bachien could take out a few seasonings that he had never seen before. One had to know that the spices that could be used were all in the Imperial Kitchen. Even if there were other spices, they would be unknown or in a faraway place. How could Ren Bachien take out spices that he had never seen before in a few days? Caretaker Goat didn't believe it at all. The others were also waiting to watch the show and teach this bastard who spoke nonsense a lesson. Hey, let me broaden your horizons. In the future, remember to stand at attention and call me brother when you see me. Ren Bachien wasn't angry at all and said cheerfully. As he spoke, he opened the cloth bag. Inside, there were small bags of things. See, this is star anise, this is cinnamon, this is monosodium glutamate, this is sesame, this is cumin, this is pepper, and this is 13 spices. You have never seen them before, right? Ren Bachien said one by one. Seeing him take out such a pile of things, those people didn't look good. Immediately, someone said, who knows if those things are real or fake? Chapter 30. Caretaker Go slapped the chef's head, turned around, and squatted in front of Ren Bachien with a cold face. He took out a little from each packet and put it in his mouth to taste. After tasting a few of them, his facial expression changed. As a chef, he felt that at least 2 of them could be used as spices. However, he still had to see how they were used and what kind of smell they would emit after being cooked. There were many things that had a smell, but not all of them could be used as spices. However, he was no longer so sure at this point in time. He stood up and looked at Ren Bachien with a complicated gaze. He clenched his teeth for a long time before saying, "You cook, we will watch from the side. If these are really spices for cooking, I will call you brother when I see you in the future. In that case, you guys have profited." When Ren Bachien spoke, Caretaker Go and the rest's faces turned black. They wanted to scold him, but they suppressed their anger. They would settle the score after Ren Bachien was done cooking. However, many of them looked at Ren Bachien's relaxed expression and suspected that they would not have the chance to settle the score. The Imperial Kitchen was probably going to be wiped out this time. Ren Bachien no longer paid attention to them. He walked 2 rounds in the Imperial Kitchen and remained silent. Finally, he found half a leg of a beast from the corner of the wall. He had seen this kind of meat in the kitchens of the beast park. It was the kind of animal that pulled carts on the streets, but it looked like an enlarged version of a goat. It had a strong odor, but it tasted very good. He felt that it was much more delicious than the mutton on earth. Who can help me cut it into slices? One plate is enough. Rinpoche turned his head and asked the crowd at the entrance. His knife skills could not be compared to these chefs, so he did not want to embarrass himself. You go. Caretaker Go clenched his teeth, but still chose someone to help Rinpoche. Following which, Rinpoche took out another piece of meat, turned his head to look at the crowd, and revealed a smile that he thought was friendly. The meaning behind it was self-evident. The people in the imperial kitchen looked at him and were so angry that their teeth itched. This time, it was another person who walked towards Rinpoche with a kitchen knife. If this was on Earth, it would look like he was taking revenge on society. Rinpoche would definitely hide as far away as possible. However, the people of Deo all looked like this, so Rinpoche did not care. Instead, he exhorted, cut it into small pieces, 1 layer of fat and 1 layer of lean meat with some skin. Seeing that the 2 people were cutting, Rinpoche found 2 cucumbers and washed them. He then slapped them on the chopping board twice before chopping them into pieces. Yes, that's right, this is the cucumber with garlic sauce. It's a pity that there's no peeling. Later, I'll fry some peanuts and mix them together. After the meat was cut and washed, Rinpoche marinated it with cumin, the spices of this world, and Sichuan peppercorns. He would prepare cumin lamb and braised it in braid. Rin lamb Rin prepared. Water. However, Qian said, and why is this wok so heavy? Shun of. Although adults could move it, it was impossible for them to flip the spoon with one hand. Rinpoche put aside. He estimated that it weighed at least 7 to 8 kilograms. Rinpoche turned his head and saw that the 2 men had gone back to stand and watch. He gestured with his hand and said, I will tell you what to do, and you 2 will do it. They can't even stir-fry. How can they cook like this? Someone muttered. Rinpoche spread his hands helplessly. The frying ladles in this world were too heavy. He thought about the kitchen knife he took just now and realized that it wasn't light either. Was it their habit or something else? Or did the important things feel good to the touch? Rinpoche felt that it was highly possible that these chefs were burly and could fit 2 of him. The 2 chefs walked over reluctantly. Rinpoche instructed one of them to stir-fry the brown sugar and soy sauce until they were bubbling. Then, he added some spices that resembled scallions and ginger. Finally, he stir-fried the meat. Rinpoche had to use one hand to pick up the wok, but the Deo people handled it as if it was a piece of paper. This made Rinpoche realize the gap between him and the Deo people. Other than the 2 chefs, the rest were watching from a distance. Although they didn't like Rinpoche, they focused their attention on him. This was because they had never done the process of stir-frying the sugar before. When the nutmeg, star anise, and cinnamon were added, the aroma wafted out. The entire imperial kitchen could smell the aroma. The eyes of the surrounding chefs lit up when they smelled it. Apart from other ingredients, the aroma alone was too tempting and fragrant. The other ingredients were from their place, but they had never made such an aroma before. It could only be said that Rinpoche had indeed brought seasonings that could improve the quality of the dishes. Rinpoche instructed the other chef to stir-fry the cumin lamb while the other ingredients were simmered. Once the cumin was put in, a strong and fragrant cumin aroma wafted out. It was something that these chefs had never smelled before. This time, everyone couldn't stand still and crowded over. Rinpoche first scooped the cumin lamb into a small plate. He ate a piece, smiled, and passed the plate to Caretaker Go. Try it? Caretaker Go took the plate with a sullen face. When it was slightly cold, he used 2 fingers to pick up a piece, put it in his mouth, and carefully tasted it. He then passed the plate to the chefs behind him. Each of them quickly took a piece and put it in their mouth. Their eyes immediately lit up. The fishy smell of the meat was greatly reduced. It was even more tender and delicious, especially with the fragrance of the cumin. It was simply praiseworthy. After eating one piece, when they wanted to look for more, they realized that the plate was already empty. How is it? Rinpoche smiled. Caretaker Go clenched his teeth and stared at Rinpoche. Finally, he lowered his head and said, Brother Ren, not bad, not bad. Rinpoche clapped his hands and smiled. He then looked at the other chefs. Brother Ren. Seeing that Caretaker Go had already called him, everyone could only open their mouths. Hearing the 7 or 8 burly men calling him Brother Ren, Rinpoche felt at ease and said, All right, just remember to call me brother when you see me in the future. Calling me Brother Ren sounds weird. The chefs at the scene all felt sullen. However, who asked them to lose the bet? Since Caretaker Go had already called him, how could they not? Who would have thought that this guy from the Beast Park would actually take out so many seasonings that they had never seen before? When the red braised meat was ready, Rinpoche divided it into 2 portions, one large and one small. He first tasted it before passing it to Caretaker Go. After eating this fragrant, soft, and melt-in-your-mouth red braised meat, everyone's sullen feelings were thrown to the side. They only wanted to know what these seasonings were. Where exactly did he get them from? Chapter 31. Rinpoche covered the cumin lamb and red braised meat with a lid and asked them to fry some peanuts. This time, without Caretaker Go's instructions, someone took the initiative to do it. Now, everyone wanted to know from Rinpoche what these spices were all about. Regarding this question, Rinpoche did not hide it. After all, it was just some spices. It was fine as long as he could show off in the imperial kitchen. This is cumin. All of you have tried it just now. It can remove the fishy smell and increase the tenderness of the meat. Another very important function is that it has a little preservative effect. After all, the weather is so hot and a dish won't be kept for long after it is cooked. Cumin can slow down the deterioration of the taste of the dish. Even though some of the terms were different, everyone could easily understand what Rinpoche said. Where can I buy this cumin? Someone immediately asked. The others looked over expectantly. However, they did not know if Rinpoche would tell them. After all, they had never seen this before. It was considered a unique item, and its value could be imagined. Wait for me to plant some and see how the output is. Rinpoche thought for a while and said, Can you sell it to us? Of course. Rinpoche spread his hands. What else can I do if I don't sell it? I don't intend to be a chef. Previously, Rinpoche mentioned spices that they had never heard of. Their impression of Rinpoche was that he was full of nonsense. In addition, he did not look like a Dayo citizen, so they were extremely disgusted with him. When Rinpoche really took out the spices, their attitude began to change. When Rinpoche agreed to sell them the spices, their eyes were already burning with eagerness. After all, the attitude of other people towards Dayo was barbaric and irritable. However, they had to admit that they were all straightforward people. They would say one thing and say another. Rinpoche ignored them and continued. This is star anise, nutmeg, cinnamon, pepper. He explained all the spices to them. After listening to him, everyone in the imperial kitchen almost worshipped Rinpoche. Not to mention calling him brother, they could even call him uncle. The spices that Rinpoche took out were an eye-opener for them. With these spices, they were confident that they could make more dishes. Furthermore, the taste was more than 1 grade higher than before. After Rinpoche explained it to them, it was much easier to instruct them to work. He crushed the fried peanuts, chopped the spicy green fruits, and tossed them in. Then he put the cucumbers in and mixed them with salt, brown sugar, monosodium glutamate, and minced garlic. Everyone tasted it and asked him what the white granules were that weren't explained. Rinpoche shook his head and said, MSG, I'm afraid this thing can't be produced in a short period of time. Hearing him say that, although everyone felt a little regretful, they had already gained a lot. One had to know that the imperial kitchen only had soy sauce, vinegar, brown sugar, salt, and a few vegetables similar to onions, ginger, garlic, and chili. This time around, Rinpoche had taken out 6 or 7 of them, which made them feel as if they had opened the door to a whole new world. Send the dishes to Her Majesty, Rinpoche said to Caretaker Go. Caretaker Go cupped his fists at Rinpoche and said, Whatever you say in the imperial kitchen from now on. Then he got someone to put together a fruit and sent it to Her Majesty. Rinpoche walked around and saw that there were still ice cubes in the corner. He said to the rest of the imperial kitchen staff, "Find a box and put the ice cubes in it. Then put the vegetables, fruits, and meat in it. It can be stored for a longer period of time. The hotter the weather, the faster the food will go bad. The lower the temperature, the longer it can be stored." Now, everyone was just short of worshipping Rinpoche like a god. After hearing what he said, they immediately nodded their heads and prepared to find someone to make a box and follow Rinpoche's instructions. Caretaker Go and the rest sent the dishes into the palace. Just as they opened the lid, they could smell the aroma of the red braised pork from afar. The two maids beside the Empress secretly swallowed their saliva. "I have never seen this dish before." The Empress took a glance and said casually, "It's made by Caretaker Run. I have never seen this dish before, but the taste is indeed not bad," Caretaker Go said in full detail. "Oh, I remember now. You guys even made a bet, right? Last time, you said it was that fellow with the surname Rin. This time, it's Caretaker Run. Did he win?" The Empress sat up slightly and said, "Indeed, he won. He took out a few spices that I have never seen before. Your Majesty will know after you taste it," Caretaker Go said. The Empress nodded her head slightly. When the poison was served to her, the first thing she tasted was the red braised pork. The aroma of this dish was the strongest, and it made her feel a little hungry. Originally, it looked a little greasy, but after eating a mouthful of the red braised pork, it didn't feel greasy at all. It was fragrant and glutinous, especially the flavors brought about by the few spices that she had never tasted before made the Empress nod her head. "Very good. What is this called?" "Red braised pork," Caretaker Go said. "The name doesn't sound good, but it's indeed not bad." Following which, she ate the lamb with cumin. Even though it didn't look much different from what she usually ate, with the addition of cumin, the lamb became even more tender. The fishy smell was also reduced by half. Coupled with the fragrance of cumin, the Empress was similarly full of praise. Today, the Empress ate a lot more. Even though her every move was still elegant, her speed was much faster. When the dishes were finally served, Caretaker Go looked at the amount of food on the plate and knew that the Empress had eaten half more than usual. This was extremely rare. It could be seen that Her Majesty really liked these new dishes. "Very good, very good. Do this again tomorrow. In addition, you can look for him to learn a few more new dishes." The Empress stood up and said as she walked a few steps on the ground. "Yes, Your Majesty. Aren't you going to arrange for Caretaker Rin to work in the imperial kitchen?" Caretaker Go asked. Even though he hated Rinpoche's attitude at the start, when Rinpoche took out the real stuff, he also approved of Rinpoche. Furthermore, not only was Rinpoche familiar with all kinds of spices, he was also proficient in many new dishes that he had never seen before. It would be a pity to continue to work in the Beast Park. Regardless of whether Rinpoche was to be the head chef or the assistant chef in the imperial kitchen, Caretaker Go had no opinion. "Forget about him. I have my own arrangements. Go back and ask him to tell me about that romance of the three kingdoms. Qing Yuan, follow him and bring him here." "Yes, Your Majesty." A tall and good-looking female attendant who was about 20 years old answered softly. After leaving the palace hall, the female attendant opened the lid of the dish and secretly tasted a piece. Her eyes immediately lit up. Just now, when she smelled it, she felt that it was very similar. Only after tasting it did she know how delicious it was. "Oh, it's indeed delicious." After satisfying her curiosity, Qing Yuan sucked the grease off her fingers. She placed both her hands behind her back and rolled her eyes. "Brother, run. Her Majesty asked you to tell him about Romance of the Three Kingdoms," Caretaker Go said to Rinpoche when he entered the courtyard of the imperial kitchen and saw him sitting there in a daze. Chapter 32. Rinpoche followed Qing Yuan into the palace. The Empress was still reclining on the couch. It seemed that she would do this every time he saw her. She liked to recline. In other words, Rinpoche suddenly noticed a problem. The couch was very wide. A normal person sitting on it wouldn't be able to lean against the back. Furthermore, it would be very far away. It would definitely be uncomfortable to sit like this. This discovery made Rinpoche think of something. However, he quickly withdrew his thoughts and continued to narrate Romance of the Three Kingdoms, not far away from the Empress. After narrating for 2 rounds, the sky was already dark. The Empress then asked him to stop. You disappear every 3 days. What are you doing? The Empress asked lazily while squinting her phoenix eyes. Rinpoche's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. Beads of perspiration rolled down his back and forehead. Although he knew that this day would come, he still wanted to hide it for a period of time. This was because he couldn't explain his disappearance every 3 days. When he was discovered, the higher his status, the more secure his safety would be. Previously, when he found out that the people of Dayo were all boorish and straightforward people, he was more or less relieved. He thought that perhaps he wouldn't be discovered so quickly. When he was in prison, no one should have discovered him. He didn't expect to be discovered after leaving twice. Although the Empress had a lazy look on her face, Rinpoche suspected that he would be beheaded if he didn't answer well. Both of you can leave. The Empress waved her hand at the maids beside her, following which the hall fell into silence. The Empress lay on the couch with one hand supporting her head and waited for Rinpoche's answer. Rinpoche's forehead was dripping with sweat. He kept asking himself, what should I do? Should I tell the truth or tell a big lie? How can I make the person in front of me believe me without giving myself away? Rinpoche hesitated for a long time and was prepared to tell a big lie. If he couldn't hide it, he would tell the truth. Your Majesty, forget it. I don't want to listen to lies. I know you have secrets. Everyone has secrets. When you appeared, it was very unexpected. Naturally, you have more secrets than others. It doesn't matter if your background is unknown. I don't care where China is. However, you have to show your value. As long as you have the ability, I can use you. I can give you whatever you want. Go down. Just as Rinpoche was about to open his mouth, the Empress suddenly spoke. Rinpoche didn't know whether he should be happy or sad about the content of her words. He was happy that after hearing the Empress's words, she would no longer pursue the matter of his origins and his disappearance every 3 days. In the future, he could be at ease. Even if he suddenly disappeared, the Empress wouldn't say anything as long as he displayed his ability and value. He didn't have to rack his brains to figure out how to hide his whereabouts anymore. The sad thing was who said that the brains of the people of Dayo were all muscles. The Empress seemed to have seen through him. She could even detect that he was lying. This made Rinpoche feel a little terrified. It was like playing a game, and suddenly the natives in the game pointed out that you were not from this world. It was a frightening feeling. When he returned to the Beast Park, he felt much better after being blown by the night breeze. In any case, it was a good thing that the Empress didn't pursue the matter. However, he had to be more attentive in the future. Just as he returned to his room, Tian and Gun hugged his legs and whimpered, refusing to let go. Rinpoche squatted down and stroked the 2 little chaps. Even though his heart was still palpitating, he had mostly calmed down. He first filled a basin of water for the 2 little chaps and fetched some bamboo leaves. The 2 little chaps sat in the bamboo leaves and grabbed the bamboo leaves on the ground to eat. Only Rinpoche returned to his room to rest. After thinking about the Empress's words over and over again, he fell into a deep sleep. The next day, he woke up and looked at the sweet potatoes. They had already been processed and were waiting to germinate. Rinpoche first looked for Caretaker Sure and brought him a look at the land for planting sweet potatoes. Near the Beast Park, there was a piece of flat land that had been cultivated. There were some fruits and vegetables planted on it. Most of the food that the odd job workers in the Beast Park ate was grown here. Usually, there were some elderly people and women who were the family members of the odd job workers here to take care of the land. What do you think of this place? The vegetables are also ripe. I will get someone to pluck them now, Caretaker Sure said as he led him to a piece of land. Let's walk around a bit more. It doesn't have to be so big for now. 1 mu is enough, Rinpoche said. After walking half around, he saw a small piece of land at an oblique corner. It was about 1 mu in size. The location was a little remote, and the land wasn't the best. However, Rinpoche didn't mind. Anyway, the requirements for planting sweet potatoes weren't high. It was better to plant them in a more remote location. Let's do it here. The land here is ordinary. The harvest will be slightly worse, caretaker sure advised. It's all right, this is fine. Rinpoche smiled. The location of this land was rather remote. However, it was just right. No one would notice what he planted. Can these two pieces be used? Thinking of the spices that he brought back, he pointed to the land not far away and asked. Caretaker sure looked in the direction that Rinpoche was pointing at. He patted his chest and said, "No problem. Even though the Beast Park doesn't have a lot of land, a few pieces of land can still be allocated." After confirming the location, Caretaker sure hurriedly left to settle the matter of the shaved ice shop. The other two shops had also been purchased. Now, all three shops had to be cleaned up. They also had to find a carpenter to make a bar counter and a bench. Rinpoche had already taught Caretaker sure the method of making ice. It was very simple. All he had to do was to know where to find saltpeter. As for making fruit shaved ice, it was even simpler. Rinpoche didn't need to participate in the subsequent matters. He just needed to split the profits. After choosing the land, the sweet potatoes hadn't germinated yet. Rinpoche had nothing to do, so he went to look for the odd-job worker who knew how to do carpentry. He asked him to make a weird-looking chair according to his requirements. Rinpoche wanted to make a sofa. He thought of it when he saw the Empress's couch. A sofa that could sink one's entire body into would definitely be more comfortable than a couch. Naturally, he would make a sofa for the Empress first. Then, he would make one for himself. Soon after, he began to look for fillers for the sofa in the Beast Park. Anything like cotton or bird feathers would do. Even though cotton wasn't available in Dayo, there were plenty of bird feathers in the Beast Park. Every day, a lot of them were cleared out, and all of them were burned as rubbish. After getting someone to keep it for him, Rinpoche realized that the people of Dayo actually didn't know how to tan leather. Leather was taken from animals and dried in the sun. Then it was sold in bundles to those leather merchants. Naturally, the price was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. If one wanted to buy tan leather from the merchants, the price would make one flinch. An ordinary sheepskin, the kind that belonged to a giant sheepskin that pulled a cart, could only be sold for 1 tael of silver. However, tan sheepskin could be sold for 10 taels of silver each. Just thinking about the profits involved made one go crazy. It was no wonder that foreign merchants flocked to Dayo. Even if it was so hot here that they could die, there was nothing to enjoy. Profits that were several times, or even more than 10 times, could make most people take the risk out of desperation. Chapter 33. When he woke up again, he looked around the unfamiliar room. He shook his head with all his might and finally became a little more clear-headed. Yesterday afternoon, he went to the palace to recite Romance of the Three Kingdoms to the Empress. At night, he was dragged along by Caretaker Sure and a few other caretakers to drink until midnight. The alcohol content in that world was not high, but it was very strong. After drinking too much, my head hurts like hell. He went to the bathroom to wash his face and looked at himself in the mirror. During this period of time, he had become much darker and more muscular. It couldn't be helped. In that world, they ate meat for almost every meal, and there were fewer things like noodles and vegetables. After a period of time, it was easier for people to gain weight. Turning on his phone, there were 3 missed calls. 2 of them were from Chun Qing, and the last one was from someone that surprised him. It was Dong Haiqing, whom he had exchanged phone numbers with the other day. I don't know why she called. Rinpoche thought about it. She seemed to have said that she wanted to get together with her local classmates. It should be about this. He didn't plan to return the call. Instead, he went online to search for the methods of tanning furs and skins. From several tanning methods, he chose 2. One was the alum tanning method, and the other was the tanning method. He needed alum and mirabolite respectively. Both of them could be found in that world. After all, he couldn't bring the materials back by himself every time. After daybreak, he went out for breakfast and drove to buy alum and mirabolite. Then, he went to a few iron and welding shops to find someone to make a homemade fan. This was something that Rinpochian had just thought of. After all, people in modern society knew a lot about fans, so it was easy to make them. He could take the finished product back and find someone to copy it. He went to a few shops and offered 3,000 yuan. Finally, someone accepted the job and could collect it the next day. Furthermore, the other party's words reminded him of something else, the air cooler. This was also very easy to make. They just needed to put a box outside the fan and put a curtain in front of it to guide the water. As for the water circulation system, there was no need to consider it. When the time came, it would be easier to put a water tank on top and pour water in. He bought some food and went home. Every time he woke up, it was already the 10th day. The food in the fridge had to be changed every time. After a few times, most of the food in the fridge was sausages, which were not easy to spoil. Just as he reached home, his phone rang. Rinpochian saw an unfamiliar name on the screen. It was Dong Haiqing. After some thought, he answered the phone on the 5th ring. Rinpochian, 8,000 years old. Dong Haiqing's voice came from the other end of the line. When Rinpochian heard this nickname that he hadn't heard for a long time, he felt slightly embarrassed. Ever since he was young, he had only had this nickname. Regardless of the new environment, it wouldn't take long for this nickname to be called again. It had to be said that in certain aspects, people's thoughts were similar. Dong Haiqing didn't mention it the last time they met, so he thought she had forgotten about it. He didn't expect it to be brought up this time. It's me. It's really not easy to find you. Dong Haiqing laughed heartily on the other end of the phone. I just came back from out of town. Oh, are you going to the class reunion tonight? You're the only one left in the city, Dong Haiqing asked. Who are they? After Rinpochian finished asking, Dong Haiqing mentioned 6 names, including Chun Bing, who was mentioned the other day. He didn't know anyone, or rather, he didn't know anyone in school. Even if they were roommates, they only nodded at each other. What? Do we have to see if there's a girl of our dreams at a class reunion? Is it so difficult to invite Bakiansui now? Dong Haiqing said. All right, I'll go, Rinpochian said helplessly. That's settled then. I'll send you the address at 6 p.m. Dong Haiqing hung up the phone. Rinpochian turned on the television and stared blankly for a while. Then, he went online to search for information. After all, he couldn't go online every time he discovered a problem, although it was fortunate to be able to travel between the two worlds. However, Rinpochian couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to travel to another world after he returned. It would be fine if he stayed on Earth, but if he stayed in that world, it would be better to memorize the knowledge. In the afternoon, Rinpochian calculated that it was about time. After taking a shower, he found a t-shirt and went out. The restaurant for the class reunion wasn't considered big. After all, they had just graduated and didn't have much money. But from the outside, the restaurant looked quite exquisite. Dong Haiqing and another pretty girl were standing at the entrance. Seeing Rinpochian's Audi A6L, Dong Haiqing's eyes lit up. You're here. I've created an opportunity for both of you. You must grasp it. I really didn't realize that Rinpochian had such a strong foundation. The other girl was naturally Chunbing. When she was in school, there was a period of time when she was attracted to Rinpochian. She even had the thought of pursuing him. In the end, after Dong Haiqing found out, she said Rinpochian doesn't have the looks, doesn't have the family background, and doesn't have the ability. She thought about it for a long time, but in the end, nothing came of it. Back then, the unripe fruit in his heart had quietly rotted away and fallen to an unknown place. During this class reunion, Dong Haiqing suddenly told her to grasp the opportunity to see if she could get together with Rinpochian. She also said that she found out that Rinpochian was actually a rich second-generation heir. This made her feel an indescribable feeling in her heart. She felt a little bitter and wanted to cry. Hey, Rinpochian, you're finally here. If I don't invite you today, I won't be able to explain myself. Dong Haiqing shouted at Rinpochian, who had just gotten out of the car. Rinpochian waved his hand. When he entered the restaurant, he saw Dong Haiqing and Chun Bing standing there. Long time no see. You seem to be doing well. Chun Bing sorted out her emotions and greeted Rinpochian. Rinpochian didn't know what to say. A month ago, he was still earning a salary of 3,000 to 4,000 yuan and living in a cramped room. A year's salary was only enough to keep himself warm. But now, he had become someone who made a name for himself in the eyes of others. For a moment, he couldn't adapt to this change. "Let's go. Everyone has gone in. You're the only one left," Dong Haiqing said to him. When they entered the private room, there were already 5 people sitting inside, 3 guys and 2 girls. When they saw Rinpoche, they were stunned. Then one of them asked Rinpoche, "You're Lu Zidong, right? I haven't seen you for a year, and you put on so much weight." Rinpoche smiled and extended his hand to shake hands. The person in front of him had a square face and looked to be at least 180 kilograms. Rinpoche remembered that when he was in school, he was only 120 kilograms. He didn't expect him to put on so much weight in just a year. "I'm Su Li. We've been classmates for 4 years, but Rinpoche doesn't even remember me. This is really embarrassing." Su Li mocked himself. The others also laughed. This time, it was Rinpoche's turn to be embarrassed. He had just graduated for a year, but he actually recognized the wrong classmates. The other 4 people were Guokai, who wore very small spectacles, Chi Kai, who had a clean appearance and neatly combed hair, and the other 2 girls, Zhang Xiaotong and Miao Feifei. Their looks were considered average. Chapter 34. Everyone sat down and chatted while waiting for the dishes to be served. They reminisced about their school days and were rather harmonious. There were no pretentious scenes like in novels. After all, they had just graduated and the gap between them wasn't huge. Su Li had opened a seafood shop with the help of his family, and it was doing well. The rest of them were working. When the dishes were served and everyone filled their cups, Dong Haiqing raised her glass and said, "We have been classmates for 4 years, and now we are gathered here again after graduating. We are all fated. We should interact more in the future so that we won't drift apart." After finishing her sentence, she downed her glass immediately. Seeing that she was so straightforward, everyone felt embarrassed to hide it and drank it all in one gulp. After drinking a glass of wine, everyone became much more friendly. Rinpoche listened at the side and rarely interrupted. He didn't participate much in school matters and had nothing to say. Dong Haiqing and Zhang Bing asked him about it from time to time and tried to lead him into their conversation. Unfortunately, Rinpoche had nothing to say and would stop after 1 or 2 sentences. After 3 rounds of drinking, Guokai, who had the lowest tolerance for alcohol, started to talk about his company's prospects and how he was valued by the leaders. Su Li, Guokai, Miao Feifei, and the rest responded from time to time, which made Guokai even more enthusiastic. The other Xiaodong was already covering her head with her hands and basically didn't say a word. It seemed like she didn't usually drink, but she drank a lot today. Rinpoche could tell that Guokai's gaze was always on Chen Bing, who was beside him. Dong Haiqing was too gorgeous, and Guokai felt that he couldn't match up to her. Chen Bing wasn't bad looking either. She gave off an innocent vibe and was the type that many men liked. Even though her legs were a flaw, a long dress could completely cover it up, and she would be very eye-catching when she walked on the streets. Therefore, it was normal for Guokai to be interested in her. In the animal kingdom, birds had to display their beautiful feathers in order to woo their mates. Animals had to show their claws and teeth and compete with other males. Humans did the same. Whether it was appearance, height, temperament, character, skills, future, or money, they were no different from birds displaying their feathers. It was just that some people cared more about appearance, some cared more about character, some cared more about potential, and some directly expressed that they only cared about money. As Rinpoche was thinking about this, he felt a little bored as he watched a few of them chatting animatedly. While Guokai was displaying his feathers, Chen Bing's attention was never on him. From time to time, she would turn her head and tell him about the interesting things that happened during her work. Rinpoche, on the other hand, was focused on listening to her. The way the two of them whispered to each other, in Guokai's opinion, made Guokai somewhat unable to restrain himself. He originally thought that he would have a chance to meet his old classmates here, but the other party seemed to be more interested in Rinpoche, which made him somewhat indignant. What did the other party have more than him? Wasn't he just a little better looking? In society, it was more important to look at ability, connections, and, to put it bluntly, money. Even though he didn't have one now, Guokai reckoned that his future was much better than Rinpochian's. Yes, even though Rinpochian didn't have the face of a celebrity, he was still considered delicate and pretty. It was easy for people to have a good impression of him. Although he wasn't as strong as him, he was more than enough to surpass him. Once again, when Chen Bing whispered to Rinpochian, Guokai couldn't help but ask, "Bakiansui, what have you been up to recently?" Rinpochian tilted his head. He seemed to have asked this question just now. Seeing that the other party was still looking at him, he replied, "I haven't done anything. I'm just squatting at home and living off the leftovers." "Oh, I see." Guokai nodded his head and didn't say anything else. After all, he had already entered society and wasn't a fool. He wouldn't say things that were too overboard. All he wanted was for Rinpochian to say it once more. Rinpochian also smiled. He knew what the other party was thinking. However, looking at Guokai's flushed face, he knew that he had drunk too much. Dong Haiqing looked at Guokai, then looked at Rinpochian. She didn't tell him that Rinpochian was a second-generation nouveau riche, and that he could earn as much as others who had to work their whole lives just by sitting at home. After all, he was a second-generation nouveau riche, and they were classmates. This was a scarce resource. She told Chen Bing because Chen Bing wasn't scheming and was easier to manipulate. If Chen Bing and Rinpochian got together, she would also gain a lot of benefits. As for the others, there was no need for her to tell them. It would be best if the others treated Rinpochian as an ordinary student who didn't have a sense of presence in school. The few of them drank some more. After Guokai had overdosed, he drank cup after cup. He sat there swaying. Dong Haiqing said, "I think everyone is drunk enough. We still have to work tomorrow. Let's call it a day. Let's meet another day. Let's exchange contact details and keep in touch in the future. Since everyone has just started work, let's go Dutch. Let's see how much it costs later. Don't mind, going Dutch is looking down on us guys. Today's meal is on me," Suli said. "Forget it. I'm happy to see my old classmate today. I'll pay for it. I'll fight with whoever tries to snatch it from me," Guokai said as he pulled Suli aside. He stood up and rushed to pay the bill. In any case, Rinpochian didn't care how he was going to pay. He could go Dutch or treat himself. However, since Guokai insisted on paying the bill, he simply sat on the stool and didn't move. In the eyes of others, he was just sitting there and waiting for the result. He had no intention of paying at all. After Guokai and Suli left, Rinpochian looked at the rest of them. Zhang Xiaodong was the only one who needed someone to take care of her. The rest didn't have much of a problem. Hence, Rinpochian followed them out. "What's the matter? You? Why are you gesticulating with me?" Just as they reached the hall, they heard Guokai's drunken voice. Guokai and Su Li were standing in front of the bar counter. The person they were talking to was a girl behind the counter. She was gesticulating with her hands anxiously. "Is this sign language?" Rinpochian took a glance. The cashier of the restaurant was a disabled person. This was really strange. He didn't have any opinion on it. Disabled people also needed to work. It was just that it was rare to see them in places like restaurants, especially when they were cashiers. "I told you to pay the bill several times. Why are you pretending not to hear me? Then, you gesticulated with me. Are you pretending to be mute?" Guokai had drunk quite a lot of alcohol just now. At this moment, his face was flushed. He slapped the counter and shouted at the top of his lungs. His voice was drunk and somewhat unclear. However, his words still attracted the attention of many customers. "I'm sorry, sir. And Faye has a hearing impairment. Her hearing aid isn't working today, so she can't hear what you were saying." A waiter in his 20s hurriedly came over to explain when he heard the commotion. The girl named Faye also quickly wrote the words, "I'm sorry," on a piece of paper. Then, she raised it with her hand. All right. Suli tried to smooth things over with Guokai. Guokai pushed Suli away and said, "Yo, this is the first time I've met a mute person who can't hear at the bar counter. Your restaurant is really creative." Chapter 35. Guokai wasn't in a good mood today and had drunk a lot. Under the influence of alcohol, even after listening to the waiter's explanation, he still said a few unpleasant words. The girl called in Faye looked at him with tears in her eyes. Although she couldn't hear him clearly, she could read his lips. Therefore, she could still understand those two sentences. I am not a mute, and Faye said word by word. It seemed that she rarely spoke. Her voice was dry and unclear. You might as well not have said anything at all. Wakai looked drunk. Many regular customers knew that this girl at the front desk had hearing problems. She usually wore a red hearing aid on her ear. They were very sympathetic towards this girl. Therefore, when they heard Gwakai's voice, many people looked over angrily. Rinpoche couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled Gwakai away and said to the girl called in Faye, Sorry, he drank too much. Rinpoche, what do you mean? I'm just asking. What's wrong? Did I get in your way? Are you trying to be a hero and save the damsel in distress? Gwakai staggered. When he realized that it was Rinpoche who was pulling him, he became even angrier. Suli, get him out of here. Rinpoche was disgusted by him. He pushed Gwakai away and said to Suli. When Dong Haiqing and Chun Bing saw the situation, they quickly pulled Gwakai out to get some fresh air. Only then did they manage to get him out. Hey, don't pull me. Let go of me. Let me talk to him. What's wrong with you, Rinpoche? Are you going to be awesome after graduation? Did I get in your way? Why are you pulling me? Rinpoche ignored him and turned to look at the girl called in Faye. She was wiping her tears at the bar counter. Her eyes were red. I am really sorry. He drank too much. Ignore him, Rinpoche said. Then he realized that the other party might not be able to hear him. He grabbed a piece of paper and wrote, Sorry, he drank too much. Then he showed it to the girl. The girl's eyes were red as she wrote, It's okay, thank you. Rinpoche smiled at her and asked the waiter, How much is it? 632 yuan. The waiter looked at the bill on the bar counter and said, Rinpoche paid the bill and wrote on the paper, Don't care about what other people say. In this world, there are people full of malice, and there are also people with good intentions. You've already done very well. Even though Faye's eyes were filled with tears when she saw what he wrote, she still smiled at him. Right, thank you, on the paper. Looking at the girl's clean smile, Rinpoche felt a soft spot in his heart being touched. Rinpoche waved his hand and left. When he walked out, he heard the waiter say scum. Needless to say, he was talking about Gwakai. He went out and saw a few people outside. Gwakai was sitting on the steps and vomiting all over the ground. He was in a daze. When the wind blows, I vomit. Chun Bing turned around and said to Rinpoche. He subconsciously looked away and said, It seems that the impression I gave others in the past was really unreliable. Chun Bing saw that he had shifted his gaze away and looked into the distance nonchalantly. That's right. Think about it. How can a person who is always silent, doesn't participate in anything, and never expresses himself be reliable? Rinpoche thought for a while and had to admit that what Chun Bing said was right. He had always been like that. It seemed that only in that world would he take the initiative to do something. The main reason was that he could see returns for everything he did. Furthermore, he was unique. What he had was something that no one else had. Perhaps it was because of this that he would want to express himself and take the initiative to do something. The two of them chatted idly. After waiting for half an hour, the designated driver finally arrived. After sending Chun Bing to her neighborhood, Rinpoche then returned to his own place. Lying on the bed, Rinpoche thought about tonight's class gathering. He really didn't have any thoughts about Chun Bing now. Then he thought about what he was going to do when he returned to the other world. Should he look for a chef to learn how to cook? Although he could cook a few dishes, they didn't look that good. At most, it would be a fresh experience for others. Chapter 36. After staying at home for 2 days, the next time he woke up, he was awakened by the heat. Just by feeling the stuffy heat in the room, he knew where he was. Looking at the sky outside, the sun had just risen. It was probably around 4 in the morning. He should sleep for a while more. However, it didn't take long for him to break out in a sweat after lying on the bed. He began to miss the air-conditioned room. He held the Finnish fan in his hand, and there was a rope at the bottom. He pulled the fan, and it started to spin. When the rope reached its end, it automatically retracted, and the fan continued to spin in the opposite direction. Although the spinning time was not long, the wind was much stronger than the fan. After playing with the fan for a while, he still felt hot, so he changed his clothes and went out for a walk. He planned to go to the ice house and bring back a block of ice. As soon as he pushed the door open, he saw two black and white guys sleeping soundly on the stone slab by the door. Rinpoche poked them twice with his finger, and one of them hugged his hand so that he wouldn't do anything funny. Then they went back to sleep. Rinpoche carefully withdrew his hand and went straight to the ice house to get a piece of ice. He placed it at the head of the bed and finally felt a little more comfortable. He went back to sleep. When he woke up, it was already 7 or 8 o'clock. First, she looked at the sweet potatoes in the room. The parts that were exposed to the water had already sprouted. In a few days, they could be planted in the ground. He first went to the kitchen to get a bowl of porridge to drink, then dragged 4 or 5 odd job workers to the fields. The crops on the few plots of land that day had already matured. This time, when he came over, he found that the crops had already been picked. Replant these 2 plots of land. Let's plant something good, Rinpoche said to the rest of them. How big of a ridge do you need? An older man asked. Since the crops were different, the ridges in the fields were also different in size. For those who had done farm work, this was something that even children knew, but for the children in the city, there were not many who knew this. If Rinpoche hadn't read a lot of information these few days, he would have been dumbfounded when he heard this question. First, the 2 plots of land were divided into 5 portions. Then, the requirements for each portion were stated. Everyone expressed that they understood. After throwing all the work to them, he strolled back. No wonder so many people wanted to become officials. It felt good to throw things to others to do. When he returned, he went to look for caretaker Sure, but he saw that he was busy. Rinpoche waited at the side for a while and got caretaker Sure to write a slip for him to go out. When you go out, take 2 servants with you. Don't go out by yourself. One look and I can tell that you're not from Dayo. It's easy to get into trouble if you go out by yourself, caretaker Sure warned. It's not that messy, right? Rinpoche was shocked when he heard caretaker Sure's reminder. It's not chaotic. However, your arms and legs aren't big enough for me to pinch you. If anything happens to you, it will be troublesome, caretaker Sure said as he sized up Rinpoche. Rinpoche thought about it and felt that his physique wasn't strong enough to be pinched by someone. Just the odd job workers in the bees park were all tall and sturdy, and each of them could fit in 2 people. He reckoned that even if he tied up 3 to 5 of himself together, he wouldn't be able to defeat one person. Also, the chefs in the imperial kitchen could smash a 10-centimeter thick chopping board into pieces with a single slap. He couldn't help but be impressed by this kind of martial strength. I will definitely bring an electroband back next time. Rinpoche made up his mind and returned to his room with a note. This time around, he brought a few books. One was regional anatomy, one was systematic anatomy, and one was typhoid and diseases. They were all prepared to be given to the Chun medicine shop. Anyway, there were plenty of these things on Earth. It would be good if he could teach them to others in this world and save a few more lives. Knowledge was precious, and it was even more precious in this world. However, to Rinpoche, these things weren't important. Other than that, he also brought 1,000 vials, some syringes, and catheters. This was mainly because he saw a piece of news on the internet before he came. It was about using vials to inject normal saline solution to stop the bleeding of a pregnant woman with massive postpartum hemorrhage. The success rate was almost 99%. It was easy to learn, and there were no side effects. It had always been said that giving birth was like taking a trip to the gates of hell. Massive postpartum hemorrhage had a very high mortality rate. If he could easily save countless lives, why wouldn't he do it? After that, he bought a lot of vials. He could still remember the expression on the girl's face when she looked at him in the medicine shop. He reckoned that she didn't treat him as a good person. A normal person definitely wouldn't buy so many vials at once. Other than these, he also bought alum and mirabolite, which were used to tan animal hides. The food in Dayo was mainly meat, such as cattle and sheep. There were a lot of cattle and sheep hides in the beast park. They were of low value and could be used to make sofas after tanning them. After sorting out the items, Rinpoche went out and found two burly odd-job workers. One of them was called Tung Hulu, and the other was Tai Dao. They were very diligent and straightforward, but they weren't considered smart. The two of them carried the items and followed behind. The three of them went straight to the Qin medicine shop. Not long after entering the city, Ren Baqian saw a few people fighting in front of him. There were also many people watching and cheering at the side. Your fist is too slow. Did you not drink milk? Hit the chin. Hit the stomach. Sigh. You didn't even hit it. Why are you so stupid? Ren Baqian passed by the side and was speechless when he heard those people shouting. These people were too hateful. However, the people of Dayo were used to it. The people who were fighting inside became even more excited when they heard the clamor around them. Before Ren Baqian could walk past the crowd, he heard someone shouting above him. There was also a commotion around him. When Ren Baqian raised his head, he saw a face getting closer and closer to him. F***CK. Before Ren Baqian could curse, he was pushed to the ground by someone. The person who pushed him down was a lady. She was wearing a bee-skin waistcoat, and her hair was tied into many small braids. At first glance, she seemed to be pretty good-looking. It was just that the corners of her eyes were a little bruised, as if she had been punched by someone. After the lady pushed him down, she rolled on the ground and stood up. She cursed and squeezed through the crowd again. Ren Baqian covered his face and let out a breath of cold air. Just now, that lady directly knocked into his face with her mouth. There was no romantic feeling at all. He just felt that his face was a little swollen. Caretaker Run, are you all right? Tung Hulu and Tai Dao asked as they pulled Ren Baqian up. Ren Baqian rubbed his face and thought that this was really an unexpected disaster. He wanted to see what the lady who knocked him down looked like. However, a group of tall and strong people surrounded her like a wall. He couldn't see anything. He could only hear the clamor and the cursing from inside. Forget it. Let's go, Ren Baqian said to the two of them while covering his face. He really couldn't get angry with this bunch of barbarians. After walking for a long distance, Ren Baqian looked at his right hand. Just now, when he was blocking the attack, he seemed to have caught something soft. It was a consolation prize. When he arrived at the Qin medicine shop, there were still many people waiting to be treated. Chapter 37. There were all kinds of herbs in the house. Once they entered, they could smell the strong smell of traditional Chinese medicine. The three of them put down their things. Tung Hulu and Tai Dao looked around as they had nothing to do. Ren Baqian took out the book, Typhoid and Diseases, and started reading. It was written in simplified Chinese. Chun Zixing definitely could not understand it. Ren Baqian still had to explain it to him later. Hence, he wanted to familiarize himself with it in advance to save some time. After reading for a while, they suddenly heard noises coming from outside. A man was shouting, "Doctor, doctor, help!" Don't panic. What's the situation? Chun Zixing raised his head and asked. My wife just gave birth to a son. She is bleeding nonstop. Doctor, please get me some ointment for my wounds, the man shouted. Chun Zixing frowned. He knew what was going on. If he could not find a way to stop the bleeding, the ointment would not be of much use. Hence, he said, the ointment is not very effective for postpartum hemorrhage. We have to stop the bleeding in a short period of time. I know, but how can we stop the bleeding? The man's eyes were red. He shouted loudly, but his voice was full of helplessness. It was a common occurrence for a pregnant woman to die from postpartum hemorrhage. Every year, there would be more than 10 cases. This was due to the inconvenience of communication in modern society. Hence, when the man knew that his wife was bleeding, he immediately panicked and rushed here. Chun Zixing also frowned. Although this world was not that strict between men and women, it was impossible for him to help the pregnant woman with this. Furthermore, he did not have any good ideas. Finally, he sighed and said, I will get you some ointment for your wounds. Go back and try it. In other words, it was up to the heavens to decide. This kind of thing happened frequently. Unfortunately, he was powerless. At this moment, someone suddenly appeared beside Chun Zixing. I have a way to stop the bleeding. Chun Zixing was stunned when he heard this voice. He turned his head and saw that it was Ren Baqian. He immediately stood up and grabbed Ren Baqian's shoulder. Really? Absolutely. Rinpoche nodded. He had heard the whole story when he was inside. He did not expect to encounter such a thing when he just brought these things over. It was a coincidence. However, he did not know that this was not a coincidence. This kind of thing happened frequently. How do I stop the bleeding? Upon hearing Rinpoche's words, the burly man's eyes lit up. He immediately grabbed Rinpoche's shoulders and lifted him up. Let go. Tai Dao and Tung Hulu came out of the room. When they saw this scene, they immediately went forward and twisted the burly man's hands behind his back. Rinpoche also landed on the ground. I'm sorry. I was too excited. How can I stop the bleeding and save my wife? The burly man didn't resist. He lowered his head like a child, waiting to be scolded, a pleading expression on his face. Let him go, Rinpoche said as he looked at him. That person didn't use much strength and didn't hurt him. It was just a subconscious movement, but her strength was too great, and she directly lifted him up. Mr. Chun, both of you follow me, Rinpoche said to them and led the way into the house. After both of them entered the house, Chun Zixing asked anxiously, Mr. Run, may I know how to stop the bleeding? Rinpoche opened the bag that he brought with him. There were 1,000 condoms inside. He took out one and said to the two of them, Use this. Chun Zixing's eyes lit up and hurriedly asked, May I know how to do it? Rinpoche found a basin of water at the side, then took out a catheter and a syringe to demonstrate to the two of them. This is called a condom. First, find a clean rope and tie the catheter and the condom together. Then, insert the condom and catheter into the uterus of the pregnant woman. Speaking up to this point, Rinpoche raised his head and looked at the burly man. When he saw that the burly man was a loss, he said, It is inserted from the birth canal to the belly, where the child is conceived. This was the first time Rinpoche explained this to someone, and he felt a little embarrassed. However, the other two were even more embarrassed than him. However, he still had to explain the method clearly. He took the syringe, drew water from the basin, and squeezed it into the catheter. After a few times, the condom swelled up and turned into a water ball. Just do this, let the condom swell up in the belly, and apply pressure to stop the bleeding, Rinpoche said as he demonstrated. May I know how confident you are? Chun Zixing asked. 99% confident, Rinpoche replied. That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The burly man was overjoyed when he heard that Rinpoche was 99% confident. Mr. Chun, the midwife will be delivering the baby, right? You can tell the midwife about this method and let her do it. However, you must be fast. In addition, don't use ordinary water, preferably salt water. Also, you have to control the amount of water yourself. All right then, I'll make a trip there. Saving a life is like fighting a fire, and it cannot be delayed. Chun Zixing didn't say much. He took the two brand new condoms, catheter, and syringes from Rinpoche and hurriedly left with the burly man. Although he wouldn't be of much help, he was afraid that the burly man would miss something and cause a life to be in danger. Therefore, he might as well make a trip there himself and inform the midwife directly. After they left, Rinpoche sat back in a chair and continued to read Typhoid and Diseases. However, he couldn't get into it no matter how hard he tried. He only hoped that things would go smoothly. After all, it was a human life. After waiting for a long time, Chun Zixing didn't return. Rinpoche was bored from waiting and decided to wait outside. When he came out, he saw a young man treating a patient. He reckoned that he was Chun Zixing's family member or disciple. However, looking at his height and appearance, he wasn't from Dayo. Therefore, he should be the former. Yeah, are you the one that I knocked down? Rinpoche suddenly heard a woman's clear voice. He turned around and saw a woman who was about 7 meters tall. She was wearing a bee-skin waistcoat with a layer of underwear underneath. Her originally pretty and heroic face was now bruised and swollen. There was even a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth. Indeed, she was the one that knocked him down just now. Why? Do you want to apologize? Rinpoche asked casually. In your dreams. I haven't even said anything about you taking advantage of me just now. The woman wrinkled her nose and said. Rinpoche was delighted. So, she still knew about it. I thought you only had fighting in your head. However, he still pointed at his bruised face. The meaning was obvious. What happened, Nagu? A burly man beside her asked. Didn't I get thrown out during the fight just now? I knocked him down. Nagu pointed at Rinpoche and said. That burly man glanced at Rinpoche and didn't say anything. Anyway, he wasn't from Dayo, so it didn't matter. If he was from Dayo, then it didn't matter. Dayo people were all thick-skinned. Even if they were knocked down, it wouldn't hurt at all. No one would fuss over such things. Rinpoche guessed his thoughts and shook his head helplessly. People from Dayo and people from other countries really didn't like each other. However, Rinpoche noticed that there were a few thumb-sized whip marks on that burly man's naked body. It looked painful just by looking at them. However, that burly man didn't seem to take it seriously. Previously, he heard from Caretaker Sure that people who fought on the streets would be whipped. He didn't know if Nagu was also whipped. Rinpoche took a glance and saw some whip marks on Nagu's exposed arm. She must have been whipped along the way. Sure enough, she didn't run away. However, seeing that her expression didn't change, Rinpoche admired her a little. Hey, I'm sorry. Just as Rinpoche was about to leave, Nagu said straightforwardly. Chapter 38. He waited at the entrance for a long time, watching the passers-by from the other world come and go. It was also a bit of fun. After waiting for an unknown amount of time, Chongsheng finally returned in a hurry. Beside him was still that burly man. Looking at his happy face, Rinpoche knew that it was a success. Knowing that his method had saved a person, he was still a little excited, and a smile unconsciously appeared on his face. Mr. Run, it's all thanks to you this time. Chen Zixing pulled Rinpoche along. Brother, thank you. Thank you very much. With a face full of joy, the burly man came forward and gave Rinpoche a bear hug. Rinpoche heard his bones creaking and almost couldn't breathe. He finally knew why it was called a bear hug. It was as if he had been hugged by a bear. His chest tightened, making it difficult for him to even breathe. With Chen Zixing's help, Rinpoche finally struggled free from the man's embrace and gasped for breath for a long time. The man did not even realize that he had almost killed his savior. Rinpoche really wanted to give him a few kicks. I don't have anything good, but this knife is the most valuable thing I have on me. I'll give it to you. The big man took out a half-meter-long knife from his waist and put it in his hand. I don't need this. You can take it back. I'm already very happy to be able to save him. Rinpoche quickly declined. How can we Dayo people do such ungrateful things? You saved my wife's life. As long as I can take it out, you can take whatever you want. However, this saber is the most valuable thing I have. I will give it to you as a token of my gratitude, the burly man said to Rinpoche with a serious face. He couldn't hide the joy on his face. Mr. Run, please accept it. If you accept it, he won't feel at ease. Chen Zixing laughed. Here you go. I'm going back to see my son. After saying that, the man turned around and left happily. Dayo people are all like this. Mr. Ren, you just have to get used to it. Chen Zixing smiled at Rinpoche as he looked at the back view of the burly man. Rinpoche looked at the dagger in his hand. It had an animal skin scabbard, and the hilt was also wrapped in animal skin. It wasn't light either, weighing at least 5 to 6 caddies. Previously, he heard from Caretaker Sure that Dayo's ironware was still very valuable. An ordinary family wouldn't be able to afford such a saber even if they didn't eat or drink for a few months. But he really had no use for this thing. Metal weapons were expensive in Dayo, but they could be found everywhere on Earth. Rinpoche shook his head helplessly when he saw that the burly man had already disappeared into the crowd. He carried the dagger and went in with Chen Zixing. As soon as Chen Zixing came back, everyone stood up and greeted him. Dr. Chen, greeted the doctor. This indirectly proved that Chen Zixing's popularity here was indeed very high. Although the people of Dayo didn't like foreigners, people like Chen Zixing were respected wherever they went. What the people of Dayo hated was the greed of foreign merchants and the haughty attitude of many people who came to Dayo and regarded them as barbarians. When they reached the patient's table, Chun Zixing pointed to the wall next to him. There was a wooden sign with some words on it. Rinpoche had seen this sign a long time ago, but he didn't know what was written on it. When Rinpoche saw Chun Zixing pointing at the sign, he asked, "What's written on it?" "It's strictly forbidden to hug a doctor," Chun Zixing said in a low voice. Rinpoche, it seemed that being too loved was also risking one's life. According to Rinpoche's knowledge, there weren't many people in Dayo who were literate. It wasn't easy for Dr. Chun to survive until now. The two of them entered the inner room, and their eyes were fixed on the things that Rinpoche was holding. "What do I have here that you want?" Chun Zixing asked straightforwardly. Not only could this thing save lives, it was also extremely effective. "The formula and ingredients for the black mud cream," Rinpoche said. Chun Zixing hesitated for a moment. The penicillin that Rinpoche mentioned previously was something that he really wanted. Furthermore, according to the description, it could save even more people. It was just that it was a common occurrence for pregnant women to die from postpartum hemorrhage. Every time he encountered such a situation, he would feel very regretful as he watched young lives wither away. Most of them were only in their teens, which made him feel even more regretful. "I just want the formula and ingredients for the black mud cream. Just like what I said previously, I will teach you how to make penicillin. As for these things, I will give them to you. They are more meaningful in your hands than in mine. However, I suggest that you distribute these things to the midwives and teach them how to use it in case it is too late," Rinpoche said. Chun Zixing turned to look at Rinpoche, tidied up his clothes, and bowed respectfully. "I thank you on behalf of them," Chun Zixing said sincerely. "It's nothing. These things aren't very useful in my hands." Rinpoche shook his head. He bought a total of 100 boxes, which was about 2,000 yuan. Including the syringes and catheters, it was just a few hundred yuan more. This amount of money couldn't do much on Earth, and he wasn't short of money now. However, in Dayo, it could save countless lives. After using these things, if you want to use them again, you must disinfect them after boiling the water. You can also use other things as replacements, such as fish bladders or animal bladders. You can study what is more suitable, Rinpoche exhorted. "We will. I will spread this method and let all the midwives know. This is a way to save lives, and we should let more people know about it." Chun Zixing nodded and said solemnly. Rinpoche smiled. This Chun Zixing was indeed a good person. "All right, a lot of time has passed today. I will teach you the production and extraction method of penicillin," Rinpoche said. After waiting for Chun Zixing to take out the few moldy fruits, Rinpoche taught him how to make the culture fluid and how to filter it. Most of the procedures were just explained, and he didn't really do it. If he really did it, there wouldn't be enough time. Furthermore, some things were lacking. For example, rice and vinegar could be bought. As for seaweed or alkaline water, Chun Zixing had to figure out how to do it himself. Chun Zixing took a pen and paper to record and occasionally asked a few questions. By the time he finished explaining everything, it was already nighttime. Rinpoche exhorted, "Remember, when using penicillin, a small number of people will develop allergies. If this happens, it's best to stop using it." Chun Zixing put down the pen and paper. After writing for an entire afternoon, he was extremely tired. After listening to Rinpoche's words, he nodded to show that he understood. The same disease would have different effects when used by different people. This was something that he knew very well. During this period, Rinpoche took a look at the things that Chun Zixing had written down and didn't recognize a few of them. However, he could tell that the handwriting looked like it was made by a chicken's claw. Who said that doctors have good handwriting? Rinpoche immediately had this thought. These are the basics. Rinpoche passed the other books to Chun Zixing. Of these 3 books, one is typhoid and diseases, and the other 2 are about anatomy. They are a different kind of medical theory and are different from your medical skills. They don't talk about looking, listening, asking, and feeling the pulse. They specialize in studying the structure of the human body. You can also refer to them. However, I don't think you can understand the words. I don't have time today. I will translate them for you when I'm free. Chun Zixing took the books carefully. He knew the value of books, especially those that hadn't appeared in the world. Perhaps one of the books could solve some of the problems that had been troubling him. Its value was immeasurable. After flipping through it, he realized that typhoid and diseases was basically filled with words, and he couldn't understand it. The other two books were about the structure of the human body and had many anatomical drawings. Chen Zixing flipped through them and asked, "How did they study it? How can the drawings be so similar?" "They probably used corpses to study it," Ren Baqian replied with uncertainty. He didn't know much about the development of Western medicine. No matter how they studied it, knowledge is always correct. "That's true." Chen Zixing nodded. Chapter 39. Wait a minute, Mr. Run. This is the formula for the black mud cream that you wanted. These are the seeds. Additionally, you will need a few things from wild beasts. Caretaker Ren, you can prepare these yourself. Aren't you afraid that I lied to you about penicillin? Ren Baqian asked with a smile. Given Mr. Ren's breadth of mind, I'm sure you won't have high hopes for me. Chen Zixing said with a serious expression, let's not talk about other things. Just this method of saving people today will save many people in the future. Thank you very much. Ren Baqian took the list with a smile on his face. It felt good to be trusted by others. He lowered his head and glanced at the paper. He didn't understand a single word. Mr. Chun, tell me and I'll write it down, Ren Baqian said helplessly. He asked someone to find a piece of charcoal and sharpen it into a pen. Then, he listened to Chen Zixing's instructions and wrote on a piece of paper. Chen Zixing had even prepared seeds for him. It was still all right at the front. However, towards the end, Ren Baqian was a little confused. There was a six-horned dragon that was dried and ground into powder. Ren Baqian's mind was filled with question marks. What was a six-horned dragon? It couldn't be a real dragon, right? Ren Baqian knew about grinding earth dragons into powder. Earth dragons are earthworms, right? He just didn't know if the earthworms in this world were any different from those on Earth. But it shouldn't be hard to obtain. At most, he could bring some back for others to raise. The last one was the green toad saliva. Nothing else. Ren Baqian raised his head and asked, No, that's all. Mr. Chun, do you have any replacements? Ren Baqian asked. Chen Zixing stroked his beard. Which one needs to be replaced? Ren Baqian used his finger to stroke the six-horned dragon and green toad. Apart from the earth dragon, are there any replacements for the other two? These things aren't hard to find. It's just that the medicinal herbs take a long time to grow and the survival rate isn't high. Also, it's a little troublesome to concoct. Chen Zixing was puzzled. Ren Baqian felt that it would be better to ask for two alternatives. He didn't know how the creatures in this world were different from those on Earth. Having more alternatives would allow him to have more choices in the future. I can replace it, but the efficacy will be greatly reduced. Chen Zixing said. It doesn't matter, Ren Baqian said. There was no need to worry about the effects of the medicine decreasing. An injury that would normally take 10 days to half a month to heal could be healed in just a few minutes with the black mud cream. The effects of the medicine would be reduced by several times. Even if it lasted for a few hours, a day, or even 2 days, it would still be acceptable. Chen Zixing mentioned 2 more ingredients, and Ren Baqian wrote them down. Then, he carefully kept the paper in his pocket. I see that your writing is similar to the writing in the books you gave me. I've never seen it before. May I know where Mr. Ren is from? Chen Zixing asked curiously. He had been holding back this question for a long time, and only now did he ask it. China. You definitely haven't heard of it, Ren Baqian replied casually. Chen Zixing pondered for a moment. There was indeed no country called China in his memory. Mr. Chun, do you have earth dragons, six-horned dragons, and green toads? Ren Baqian asked. Since the black mud cream was made by the Chun family medicine shop, it was very likely that there were ready-made materials here. There are indeed some. What Chen Zixing said was exactly what Ren Baqian thought. Chen Zixing then led them to the backyard. Just as Ren Baqian thought, the earth dragon was an earthworm. Chen Zixing had dried them, so there was no need for Ren Baqian to bring them back. He would first go back and see if the earthworms on Earth could work. As for the six-horned dragon, it was kept in a jar filled with water. It was golden in color, had 6 small horns on its head for limbs and a tail. It seemed to be an amphibious creature. Rinpoche looked at it for a long time and felt that it looked like a salamander, but he wasn't sure. The green toad was the size of 2 palms, and its body was rather huge. Its back was full of bulging dots. When Rinpoche heard its name, he thought it would be green in color, but it was actually brown. According to Chen Zixing, this thing was green before it matured, and it would only turn brown after it matured. "Can you give me this six-horned dragon and green toad?" Rinpoche asked. Chen Zixing stroked his beard and said, "This is a small matter. However, Mr. Rin, you have to take note that if you touch the green toad with your skin, you'll get a rash that is painful and itchy. If you want to cure it, you can only apply the juice of the 9-wood flower to the rash. Otherwise, you'll have to wait for a month for it to slowly fade. If you want to extract its saliva, you just need to smear honey on a wooden stick and lick it clean." "Understood. Thank you." Rinpoche was delighted. He didn't expect things to go so smoothly. He had already obtained the formula and ingredients for the black mud cream. He just needed to bring it back to Earth and hand it over to Qin Qing. After that, it would depend on their research. "All right, it's getting late. I still have to go back. I will teach you some other day. You could try the production method of penicillin and verify its effects. The earlier this thing is produced, the more people can be saved." Rinpoche asked the 2 of them to carry the jar and asked for some 9-wood flowers. After asking them what they ate, he stood up and bade them farewell. "Mr. Rin is kind. I admire you very much," Chen Zixing said. "I just want to save as many as I can." "Human life is precious," Rinpoche said. However, he didn't notice the looks of admiration on Tung Hulu and Tai Dao's faces. They had witnessed everything that happened today from start to finish and naturally knew the cause and effect. Not to mention other things, Rinpoche's act of teaching others his skills just to save a few strangers made them admire him from the bottom of their hearts. On the way back, Tung Hulu and Tai Dao looked at each other with the jar in their hands and shouted, "Caretaker Rin, what's the matter?" Rinpoche was in a good mood. He had obtained a formula for the black gypsum and also saved someone. For an ordinary person, saving someone seemed to be very far away from him. He felt happy from the bottom of his heart when he thought that another person's life was saved and a family was saved. "In the future, if you need anything, just let us know. We will definitely do it well," Tai Dao said. Just because of what happened at the medicine store today. Rinpoche tilted his head and looked at the 2 of them. "We are not good with words, but Caretaker Rin is a capable person who cares about the lives of strangers. We are willing to work for someone like Caretaker Rin." Tai Dao nodded and continued. "Yes, Caretaker Rin is a good person," Tung Hulu echoed. "Haha, that's good," Rinpoche said happily and patted their shoulders. As for the specifics, he would see in the future. On the way back, Rinpoche looked at the dagger in his hand and thought to himself, could all the daggers in this world be divine weapons? Perhaps the dagger that person gave him could cut through iron like mud? Thinking of this, he pulled out the dagger. The blade was black, half a finger thick, and there were some rust stains on it. No matter how he looked at it, it did not look like a divine weapon at all. Holding on to his last glimmer of hope, he slashed at a tree by the roadside. The tree was not cut into 2 as he expected. There was only a scar on it. Immediately, he knew that he was thinking too much. Other than being thicker and blacker, it was not much different from a kitchen knife that cost $10 on Earth. Fairy tales were indeed all lies. The few of them returned to the Beast Park, and the kitchen was already empty. Tung Hulu and Tai Dao sent the jar back to Rinpoche's house. Rinpoche went to pull the cook out of bed and said, "Come, I'll give you something good." "What is it?" The cook followed Rinpoche out of the house with a blank look on his face. "Go to the kitchen and prepare some meat first. I'll go get something." Rinpoche patted the cook's back and went straight to the room to get some spices. When he reached the kitchen, he put it on the table. "Look, it's good stuff. Are these the spices that Caretaker Rin uses in the Imperial kitchen?" The cook opened a small bag and was pleasantly surprised when he saw what was inside. "Oh, you're quite well informed." Rinpoche patted the cook's back and said, "Hey, I have a brother who works in the Imperial kitchen. Today, he even asked me about you." The cook touched the back of his head and gave a simple and honest smile. "Yes, I'll tell you how to use these spices. This seasoning is for stewing. This cumin is for roasting meat. This pepper is for—" After Rinpochian told him how to use them, he reminded him, "Use them sparingly. It will take a long time for us to grow them ourselves. These things will be gone after we use them up." "Grow them ourselves?" The cook immediately lost his voice. "Of course, these things are not for sale. If we don't grow them ourselves, where are we going to get them?" Rinpochian said. "However, other than the ones that are used by the Imperial kitchen and you, the rest will all be mine. I still need to sell them for money." Hee. The cook laughed foolishly. As long as he was given some to use, nothing else mattered. After Rinpochian finished speaking, he said to Tung Hulu and Tai Dao, "Did you hear that? I got those 2 plots of land to plant spices. The 2 of you can help keep an eye on them and make them eat more. Caretaker Ren, don't worry. Even if Caretaker Ren didn't remind us, we wouldn't slack off." The 2 of them patted their chests and said. Rinpochian believed this. Over the past few days, he hadn't seen a single crafty person. He had to admit that the people of Dayo were indeed honest and capable. After waiting for half an hour, the meat in the pot was still not ready, but the aroma of the meat assailed their nostrils. The smell made them even hungrier. "Caretaker Ren, you are here? I haven't seen you for a whole day," Caretaker Sure said as he walked in. "I was delayed outside." "Caretaker Sure, what is this? Come and get something to eat. What are you stewing? Why does it smell so good? I can smell it from afar." Caretaker Sure's eyes were fixated on the steaming pot. Rinpochian laughed. Caretaker Sure was actually here to look for food. "You're just in time." The few of them anxiously looked at the cooked meat in the pot. Each of them took a bowl and smelled the aroma. They didn't wait for the meat to get cold before stuffing it into their mouths. Every one of them cried out from the scalding heat and snatched the meat while it was still scalding. Seeing them like this, Rinpochian's appetite increased. He felt that the meat today was especially fragrant. After the few of them finished their meal, Rinpochian sat at the entrance and chatted with Caretaker Sure. Rinpochian was impressed when he saw Caretaker Sure holding a bowl of meat soup and occasionally spitting out mouthfuls of it. In this meal just now, the few of them ate at least 5 kilograms of meat each. The few of them only ate a huge hind leg. No wonder the people of Dayo have such good physiques. Indeed, good physiques are supported by a good appetite. Chapter 40. The next morning, Rinpochian prepared some bamboo leaves and water for Tian and Gungun. Then, he brought them to a piece of flat land not far from the kitchen to look for leather. In a large open space, there were poles with ropes in the middle. All kinds of furs were hung on the poles, and after some simple cleaning, they were hung there to dry. There were cowhide and sheepskin. There were about 100 odd-job workers and family members in the beast park. Based on the appetite of the people of Dayo, the amount of meat they ate every day was quite large. At the very least, they had to kill 3 cows and a sheep. This was under the circumstance that the sheep in this world were bigger than the horses in Dayo's previous world. Every day, after killing them, they would simply wash their skins and dry them. Then, they would fold them into bundles and store them in the storeroom. Once they had accumulated a certain amount, they would sell them to buy alcohol. This kind of fur, which had only gone through the simplest treatment, was of very low value, so no one cared about it. Some of them were the skins of the dead animals in the beast park. Rinpochian even saw the skin of a saber-toothed tiger. There were black stripes on the yellow fur, which were much larger and denser than the stripes on a tiger. It looked more like the skin of a leopard, but the patterns on it were much larger and not circular. It was said that 2 saber-toothed tigers fought yesterday, and one was bitten to death. The furs that were being dried here were all in good condition. Rinpochian covered his nose and looked at them. Then, he got someone to roll up all the dried furs and carry them away. Although it had been cleaned, it still emitted an extremely heavy stench, attracting many flies and other vermin to fly around. Remove the oil film and flesh from the surface first. Rinpochian instructed as he pulled Tai Dao and Tung Hulu over. Of the 10 servants under him, 3 were in the ice cellar, 5 were in the pear field, and only 2 were here. He spent the whole morning cleaning out some leather, then soaking it in water for another 2 days before it could be used. Rinpoche tied up the rest and threw them to the side. Then he brought the 2 of them to Baishur district to look for a blacksmith to forge the fan according to the pattern. Rinpoche had considered going out by himself. However, after thinking about it, the Dayo people didn't treat outsiders very well. Furthermore, Dayo's combat power was much stronger than his. If anything were to happen, it would be too late for him to cry. In the end, he could only wait for the 2 of them and only went out after noon. When he arrived at Baishur district, he saw the same shop owner as last time. He showed the fan to him. This can be done, right? Some parts can be replaced, such as the fan blades and the base. They can be made of metal or wood. What is this? The shop owner looked at the fan with a puzzled expression. He had never seen anything like this before. Rinpoche aimed the fan at the store owner and pulled the rope all the way to the end. The blades of the fan spun, sweeping up a gust of wind toward the shop. After the rope was straightened and released, the fan blades began to rotate in the opposite direction. Feeling the wind blowing against his face, the blacksmith shop owner's eyes lit up. This thing is interesting. After receiving the fan, the owner pulled the rope behind it, and the fan blades began to spin. Then, he let go and turned in the opposite direction. Then he turned the fan to his face, pulled the cord, and let go. Pull the rope. Let go. Pull the rope. For a moment, she was having so much fun that she forgot about Rinpoche and the rest. Rinpoche saw that the shopkeeper was having fun. After waiting for a while, he had no choice but to interrupt him. How is it? Can you do it? Oh. The shopkeeper suddenly reacted. Then we'll have to take it apart to see the structure inside. Is that okay? Yes. The lid at the back will open as soon as I lift it. The shop owner opened the back cover according to Rinpoche's instructions. The internal structure was very simple. There were only bearings, rubber rings, and ropes. At first glance, it looked very simple. However, the shopkeeper frowned and asked, "Where did you make this? What's wrong?" Rinpoche asked, "We can't reach this level. This is too perfect. The thickness of every part is the same. I really don't know how it was made." The shopkeeper pointed at the bearings inside and said to Rinpoche. Rinpoche finally understood. The bearings made in the modern era were naturally not comparable to the ones made by these craftsmen. It's fine as long as it doesn't affect the usage. However, it must be smooth. Otherwise, it will affect the strength of pulling the rope and there will be noise, Rinpoche said. The shopkeeper touched his chin and said, "That can be done. We don't have this thing here." The shopkeeper pointed at something inside and said. Rinpoche took a look and saw that it was a rubber ring. This thing could be made with animal tendons, but there was no need to tell the shopkeeper. After the first one is done, I'll check it. If it's up to standard, I'll need another 20. We might need more in the future. However, within 3 months, you can't leak this thing out and you can't let anyone else make it, Rinpoche exhorted. Initially, he wanted to set a longer time limit. However, he thought that this kind of earthen fan was easy to make and others could easily understand it. Even if he restricted the shopkeeper from making it for others, as long as others bought one, they could easily find a blacksmith shop to replicate it. Therefore, I might as well limit it to 3 months. As long as the first batch of my goods appears in the market, I'll be able to make a sum of money. 3 months isn't long. However, you have to make at least another 20, the shopkeeper said. As long as you can make it up to standard. If you can't make it up to standard, no one will ask you to make this thing, right? Rinpoche said, "Don't look down on my skills. Although I can't reach this level, I can definitely be smooth." The shopkeeper patted his chest and said, that sound was so loud that Rinpoche felt like his internal organs were going to come out. "Can you leave this thing here for me to study?" The shopkeeper asked again. He kept fiddling with the fan. Rinpoche didn't know if he liked the fan or the bearings inside. "Sure. How long will it take for you to make it?" Rinpoche asked. "This thing can be collected the day after tomorrow," the shopkeeper said. Rinpoche calculated that he should be returning to Earth the day after tomorrow. "I will give you one more day, 3 days later." Rinpoche left the fan with Tung Hulu and Tai Dao. He returned to the beast park and continued to clean the fur. In the afternoon, Rinpoche was called to the palace and brought to the imperial kitchen. Brother Ren, upon seeing Rinpoche, caretaker Go's facial expression twitched for a long time. Finally, he lowered his head and called him brother. Rinpoche liked the character of Dayo people. As long as he said it, he would definitely do it. Even if he was unwilling, he would still do it. Furthermore, Rinpoche felt extremely comfortable when he saw a burly man lowering his head and calling him brother. The other people in the imperial kitchen greeted him with much more sincerity. After all, the condiments that Rinpoche brought were an eye-opener for them. They could proudly say that at least the items in Dayo's imperial kitchen were the most complete in the world. The imperial kitchen in the Lianyun kingdom couldn't be compared to the imperial kitchen in the Great Xiao Palace. Brother Run, what are you cooking today? One of the people in the imperial kitchen asked. At first, it was a little awkward to call him Brother Ren. However, after a few times, he got used to it. Rinpoche was from the northeast. Naturally, he was most familiar with northeast cuisine. Chapter 41. Although it was called stewed chicken with mushrooms, it was just a kind of stewed chicken with mushrooms. However, the taste was much better than that of ordinary chicken. Even before it was taken out of the pot, its fragrance had already assailed the nostrils, causing everyone in the imperial kitchen to salivate. The double-cooked pork was made with the meat of an animal called enrich. The meat was very similar to pork. The braised pork he made last time was also made with this kind of animal. There were a lot of cows in Dayo, mainly water buffaloes. There were a lot of them in the plains and lowland jungles. Many of them were farmed as well, and they were the main type of food in Dayo. After stewing the dish, Rinpoche found a place to sit. A few chefs from the imperial kitchen ran over to ask him about the details of the cooking process, such as how to add the seasonings. Rinpoche arrived one by one. Brother Run, the manager said that you should deliver the dishes for today, a chef said to Rinpoche after the dishes were served. Oh, Rinpoche raised his head and looked for caretaker Go. Normally, caretaker Go was the one who sent the gifts. His Majesty asked you to deliver it after you're done cooking, the chef explained. Only then did Rinpoche nod his head. He carefully carried a metal plate with a few plates of cooked dishes and rice on it and covered it with a lid. He carefully carried it out and saw a soldier standing guard outside. They followed him all the way to the palace. When the dishes were sent into the palace, someone took them to the side to test for poison and then brought them to His Majesty. On the other hand, Rinpoche waited at the bottom of the steps. Continue with that story of yours. The Empress got up from the couch. After she finished speaking, she began to taste the dishes for the day. Just as Rinpoche had expected, other than steamed pork and double scoop, the Empress also had a preference for pine nuts and peas. Although she was an emperor, she was still a woman. She had a preference for sweet dishes. Rinpoche thought about the content of the previous lecture. It was about the battle between Sun Bofu and Yin Baihu. Next, it was about Liu Xianfeng shooting halberds at the Yuan Gate. The Empress didn't listen much and said, "It's only 150 steps. Why are you making such a fuss?" There was no lack of hunters in Dayo who were able to hit their targets. Previously, when I heard you speak of it, I was thinking, you are so weak, yet your country was not destroyed. Rinpoche was left speechless by the Empress's words. The difference in strength between the people on Earth and this world was too great. There was no way to compare them. He would send people flying with a kick at the slightest provocation, and even the stone wall would have a hole in it. How could a person get up and fight again unscathed? This seemed to be very common in Dayo. On Earth, this kick would have killed him, not to mention tearing down a city gate with his bare hands. Perhaps only Li Yuanba from the Romance of the Sui and Tang dynasties could try. After talking about the three kingdoms for 4 to 6 hours, Rinpoche finally withdrew. After Rinpoche left, the Empress picked up a piece of paper beside her and looked at it again. Everything that happened to Rinpoche at the Chun family's medicine shop was clearly written on it. He's rather kind-hearted, the Empress said faintly. However, this method of his can be carried out first. However, there was another thing in the report that the Empress was very concerned about. It was the 3 books that Rinpoche took out. When Rinpoche arrived, he was clean and had nothing on him. For him to be able to take out 3 books now, it probably had something to do with him disappearing every few days. Although he didn't know where he went, it was probably related to the situation at that time. Appearing out of thin air and disappearing out of thin air, leaving no trace behind. This kind of thing made her puzzled, but she could explore it later. She was more concerned about another point. Although Dayo respected martial arts, as an empress, she couldn't be so short-sighted. She had studied Great Xia and the Yun Nation before. Naturally, she knew the role of scholars, craftsmen, culture, and technology. Furthermore, Dayo's predicament had always been there. Almost all the technical content was brought in by merchants. Several generations of emperors had always wanted to send people out to learn, but the results were very little. Rinpoche had once taught the method of making ice to the Beast Park's manager and taught the method of stopping postpartum hemorrhage to the people at the Chun family's medicine shop, just to save a few more people. This showed that not only was Rinpoche capable, but he wasn't like the other countries that sealed off all kinds of technology and knowledge from Dayo. This allowed her to see the possibility of obtaining all kinds of knowledge and technology from Rinpoche. If he was the kind of person with evil intentions, she could use other methods to make him spit out everything he knew. However, from the way Rinpoche handled things, he could be considered as kind-hearted. Furthermore, he wasn't stingy when it came to passing on things that he knew to others. This made her feel that he could be used. What Dayo currently lacked the most was people like him. Naturally, Rinpoche didn't know what the Empress was thinking. The next morning, he brought Tung Hulu and Tai Dao to continue cleaning the leather. Rinpoche watched as the 2 of them used a knife to scrape off the minced meat and oil film on the leather. Their movements were extremely swift, and every time a knife landed, a piece of oil film would fly off. Seeing that it was scorching hot, Rinpoche went forward to give it a try. He extended his hand to Tai Dao and said, "Let me try." Tai Dao passed the knife to Rinpoche with a simple and honest look on his face. 1 cut. Rinpoche cut a hole in the cowhide with 1 cut. Rinpoche thought for a while and decided not to spoil things. He returned the knife to Tai Dao and went to play with Gun Gun and Tian Tian at one side. Gun Gun and Tian Tian spent most of the day eating and sleeping. Occasionally, when they woke up, they would play like 2 balls. Their actions made people howl. The people in the Beast Park shook their heads when they saw Rinpoche raising these 2 little things. They couldn't eat and couldn't hunt. They ate every day and were extremely stupid. They really couldn't understand why Caretaker Run liked to raise these things. However, Rinpoche didn't care at all. These were pandas. On Earth, if you wanted to see them, you had to stay far away. At most, you could take a photo with your phone. You didn't even have the chance to get close to them, let alone raise 2 of them as pets. Rinpoche sat on the stone slab in front of the door and looked at the 2 little fellows crawling around on his knees. He was extremely happy. He thought to himself that he should bring his phone next time and take a few photos of these 2 little fellows to post on the internet. At night, Rinpoche went to the palace again. This time he made twice-cooked pork, double-cooked pork, and pine nuts with peas. The previous dish, double-cooked pork, was the Empress's favorite. She finished half a plate of it by herself. This time, the Empress asked for it by name. Rinpoche had to admit that the Empress was much more thrifty than the ancient emperors. She only had 4 dishes for a meal, which couldn't even be compared to some of the village officials. Of course, this was also related to the fact that Dayo wasn't very rich. The Empress also didn't have any extravagant habits. When talking about Cao Cao's discussion about heroes, the Empress said, "This Cao Cao was indeed a character. Unfortunately, he was too weak." Rinpoche thought for a long time and felt that the Empress was definitely referring to Cao Cao's individual strength. Regardless of whether it was Lu Bu or the other valiant generals, the Empress was somewhat dismissive. According to the Empress, the description of those valiant generals in the book was something that even the commoners in Dayo could do. Yet, they could actually become valiant generals. This showed how weak these people were. This made Rinpoche speechless. The individual strength of these people on Earth was indeed inferior to that of Dayo. However, he was actually despised. This was too embarrassing for the people on Earth. He pondered in his heart. After talking about the three kingdoms, he wouldn't talk about the romance of Sui and Tang anymore. Next time, he would talk about journey to the west and investiture of the gods. Chapter 42. At night, Rinpoche returned to his house in the Beast Park. He carried the 2 jars containing the 6-horned dragon and the green toad, respectively. He stuffed the formula and seeds of the black mud cream in front of his chest and fell into a deep sleep. He didn't know when he fell asleep, but he subconsciously turned over and almost knocked the jar upside down, waking him up with a start. He opened his eyes. Although it was dark around him, he could still tell that he had returned to his bedroom in China. He moved the 2 jars to one side, switched on the lights, and opened the mesh cover. He was relieved to see that the 2 fellows were still alive and kicking inside. He covered the lid again and looked at the time. It was not yet 4 o'clock. Since he couldn't sleep, he went to the living room to watch a movie on the television. When he wanted to go out for breakfast in the morning, he realized that it was a little cold outside. He looked at the date and realized that he had been to the other world 5 times. Each time, he was there for 9 days. Adding the 3 days on Earth, it was a total of 12 days. These 5 times meant that he had been there for 2 months. It was already September. He went back to the house and found a jacket that he used to wear. It was a little tight on his body, and it seemed that he had put on weight recently. He looked at himself in the mirror. His face didn't seem to put on much weight, but his body shape was indeed more shapely than before. He went out for breakfast before calling Ching. These few days, Ching had called him twice, but as usual, no one picked up. Other than him, there was another call from Chun Bing. "You rascal, you have been missing for such a long time again. Your whereabouts are getting more and more unpredictable." Ching ranted for a long time after picking up the call. "I have the formula for the black mud cream," Rinpoche said plainly. Where are you?" Ching didn't have time to complain to Rinpoche and immediately asked, "I will send it to your father's company in a while. Speaking of which, has the research on the black mud cream been organized?" "I don't know the specifics. I didn't ask much. However, it seems that the core personnel are still lacking. It should be done soon. Once your formula is here, I reckon that we can start." "All right, I will be there in a while." Rinpoche hung up the phone and went back to move everything into the car. He drove to a foreign trade shop to buy some casual clothes before heading to Ching's father's company. When Ching saw him alight from the car, he went over and gave him a bear hug, following which he asked doubtfully, "Have you been putting on some weight recently? You become much stronger." Rinpoche smiled and said, "You've put on some weight." Looking at Ching, he was still the same. Nothing had changed. Rinpoche joked, "You and Jiang'an are about to get engaged, so stop wandering around. Be careful that you need to take medicine in the future." "Don't worry, I've been paying attention. I've been taking the medicine prescribed by an old Chinese doctor for more than half a year," Ching said with a laugh. Rinpoche couldn't help but give a thumbs up. "You're indeed far-sighted. You brought everything? Let's go up." Ching pulled Rinpoche along. "Wait, he's still in the car." Rinpoche turned around and took out a box filled with waste paper from the trunk. He took out 2 cans from the box and stuffed one of them into Ching's hands. "Take it, be careful." "What is this?" Ching asked curiously. Rinpoche carried one himself, and the 2 of them stepped into the building. Ching's father was waiting for the 2 of them in his office. Other than him, there was also a middle-aged couple. "Uncle Chun." Rinpoche nodded and greeted him as he entered. "Yes, Bachin is here. Let me introduce you. This is Professor Sun Qing, and this is Professor Su Shan. Both of them are experts in the field of medicine. Both of them heard about the effects of the black mud cream and were very interested in it. That's why they came back from overseas." "Hello." Rinpoche nodded at the 2 of them. Su Shan returned a smile, but Guiqing seemed to be thinking about something. It was as if she didn't hear what Ching's father said and didn't see Rinpoche. Rinpoche didn't feel that he was being left out. He heard that many researchers were eccentric and didn't know the ways of the world. This Sun Qing might be one of those people. Rinpoche and Chun Qing placed the cans on the table. "What's this?" Chun Qing's father asked. "Two of the ingredients, the formula and the seeds, I've brought them with me." Rinpoche took out the formula and placed it on the table. Chun Qing took a glance at it and exclaimed softly, "What are these? Qingyang grass? Harpy? What a weird name." Hearing Chun Qing's words, Sushan walked over and asked, "Can I take a look?" Rinpoche glanced at Chun Qing's father. Chun Qing's father nodded. "Sure, the contract has been signed and there's nothing to hide. I'll hand it over to you sooner or later." Sushan picked up the formula and looked at it. She had a puzzled look on her face. "What are these?" Rinpoche naturally knew what was written on the formula, but he didn't know what was written on it. If Rinpoche didn't bring the real thing back, there would be no difference between this formula and not having it. Rinpoche took out a paper bag from his pocket. There were 6 or 7 small bags in it, and all of them had words written on them. It should be a different name, just like how there's so many names for pigs. "I brought the seeds back. We'll know when we plant them." The rest of them agreed with Rinpoche's explanation. They compared the words and the formula on the paper bag one by one. All the plants matched. The remaining 3 were related to animals. "This earth dragon is an earthworm, right?" Sushan raised her head and looked at Rinpoche. "Yes. The other 2 are in this jar," Rinpoche said. "Hexagonal dragon. It should be an amblystoma. Many of them are raised for ornamental purposes. Why is it in the formula? Furthermore, this kind of creature is mainly found in Mexico. It shouldn't have existed in the past. It seems like this formula hasn't been around for a long time. However, why did the person who wrote this formula keep it in his hands all this time? I've never heard of it before. If it was said that the ancient formula was just discovered and sorted out by someone, then it was very likely that everyone knew about it. However, if it was developed in the past few decades, why didn't anyone know about it? This was rather strange. Take a look at this hexagonal dragon. Is it what you said it is?" Rinpoche opened the jar first. Without waiting for Sushan to speak, Chun Qing spoke first. "Isn't this the hexagonal dragon raised at home? It's for ornamental purposes, but it can actually be used to make medicine?" "Yes, it is," Sushan confirmed. Rinpoche thought for a while and said, "The hexagonal dragon is used as a substitute. In the past, it was an animal called Pinkyuan. Later on, it was discovered that the hexagonal dragon was more effective. Hence, it was used as the main ingredient. Look at the back of the formula. Pinkyuan, this is the previous formula." Rinpoche immediately swapped the original and substitute ingredients. Anyway, he didn't write which was the original ingredient and which was the substitute. Sushan saw that it was indeed Pinkyuan and felt relieved. The recovery ability of the hexagonal dragon is very strong, and so is the earth dragon. It is indeed possible to make use of this special effect to make medicine. Sushan was deep in thought. "In that case, we are still missing a green toad. What is it?" Rinpoche opened the lid of the largest jar. The few of them peeked their heads over and saw a brown frog that was the size of 2 palms. It looked like a toad. However, its size was a little too big. "This is a green toad?" "Yes, but you must be careful. This thing is very rare and is almost extinct. It wasn't easy to get this one. This kind of green toad likes to eat honey. Dip a wooden stick in the honey, and it will lick it to get its saliva. In addition, you must be careful. It is very poisonous." "How poisonous?" "Among the frog species, the most poisonous frogs are brightly colored. Although this one is slightly bigger, it doesn't look like it is very poisonous." Sun Qing walked over and said, "Generally speaking, with the exception of a few, most poisonous creatures will also make themselves very bright to warn their natural enemies. See, I am very dangerous. Only weak creatures will form a protective color that is similar to the color of the surrounding environment. This is the choice of evolution for thousands of years." As Sun Qing explained to the few of them, he put his hand into the jar. He seemed to be very confident in his knowledge. Obviously, in his knowledge, there were no such highly poisonous frogs like the ones in the jar. This kind of green toad is really poisonous, Rinpoche warned. Don't worry. Even if it is really poisonous, as long as there are no wounds on your hands, it will be fine. As Sun Qing spoke, he put his hand into the jar and touched the back of the green toad. Immediately, the green toad moved restlessly in the jar and let out a gurgle sound. The sound was dull and a little like the roar of thunder. Rinpoche looked at Sun Qing's actions and didn't continue to speak. Well, you are a senior intellectual. You are a PhD. You have the final say. Chapter 43. Sun Qing touched the back of the green toad with his fingers before taking out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiping his hands. The poison of toads isn't strong, and it's fine to touch it with your hands. As long as you don't put it in your eyes or eat it, you'll be fine, Sun Qing continued. Ah, I see, Rinpoche said. He was trying to hold back his laughter, but he put on a serious face and said, At that time, they told me that this kind of green toad is very poisonous, and it would cause unbearable pain and itchiness. I have been very careful these few days. There are a few types of frogs that are very poisonous, but this one doesn't belong to them. Sun Qing nodded. He wasn't sure if the poison had started to react, but before he finished his sentence, he felt that his fingers were a little itchy. I'm going to wash my hands, Sun Qing said, and went straight to the washroom. There was a washroom in Papa Chen's office. Sun Qing went in for a minute and came out with a strange look on his face. It seemed like he was trying to endure something. I'm sorry, this is called green toad, right? Although it doesn't belong to the few types of highly poisonous frogs that I know of, it is indeed poisonous. Moreover, it can poison people through skin contact. From the looks of it, the toxicity is not small. As he spoke, Sun Qing stretched out his hand. His entire right hand was covered in red dots from his wrist to his entire wrist. I haven't seen any records of this green toad. It should be a frog that isn't in the records. It has a lot of research value. But before that, I have to go to the hospital. Before I leave, I have to express my joy to join this team. Sun Qing forced a smile and nodded to them. Professor Sun, are you all right? Papa Chin stood up and asked. Su Shan also walked forward to check on his hand. From the current reaction, it shouldn't be fatal. But since it's an unrecorded species, we can't rule out the possibility that it's a rare or even unseen poison. Rinpoche looked at Sun Qing in a daze. This person's reaction after being poisoned seemed to be a little different from ordinary people. No wonder he was a professor that was one level higher than a saint. The next level would be a martyr, right? Rinpoche started to admire him. Seeing that Sun Qing was about to leave, he quickly called out to him, Professor Sun, I have the antidote here. Sun Qing turned to look at Rinpoche and said, I guess so too. Carrying such a rare and fast-acting poison, as long as one isn't stupid, they would bring along the antidote. Rinpoche's face twitched. He didn't know whether he should like or hate this person. Anyway, it was quite annoying to talk. He took out a small paper bag from his pocket. Inside was a kind of dried flower petal. Crush it and soak it in water before applying it to your skin, Rinpoche said. All right, you probably won't be able to use this thing, right? Then I won't stand on ceremony. Guo Qingwen took out 2 flower petals and put the paper bag into her pocket. Rinpoche looked at his actions and didn't say anything. Sun Qing took a teacup and threw the petals into it. He then took out a pen from his pocket and used hot water to disinfect the tip of the pen. Then he crushed the petals. He looked up at Rinpoche and asked, Cold water or hot water? Rinpoche shrugged. I don't know. It should be cold, right? Sun Qing took some out and wrapped it in a piece of paper. Then he poured a small amount of cold water into it, stirred it, and wiped it on his hands. 10 minutes later, his hands were covered with red spots. It looked as though he had contracted some infectious disease. It was a little scary. Sun Qing suddenly said, The pain and itch are alleviated to a certain extent. It's effective. He then added some water to the flour paste and rubbed it on his hands again. Sun Qing and Su Shan observed carefully. After another 10 minutes, the red spots on his hands started to diminish. This thing is not bad. It's very effective. What kind of flour is it? Sun Qing asked. 9-wood flour, Rinpoche said. What other uses does it have? I'm not sure about that, Rinpoche replied honestly. Sun Qing nodded and said to Papa Chun, it's worth researching. When will the research start? It can already be started. There is still some equipment that will arrive later. It shouldn't affect the early stage of the research, Papa Chun said. Following which, they talked about the research lab. Rinpoche and Qin Qing weren't interested. After saying goodbye, they went outside to smoke. Papa Chun looked at Rinpoche's back and smiled. This was to show that he didn't want to be involved in the future. Papa Chun was very satisfied with this performance. He was really afraid that Rinpoche, who was young and full of vigor, would want to make a career out of it. It would be easy for him to get into trouble. Now that the research was successful, he would gain fame and status, and Rinpoche would get most of the profits. Rinpoche accompanied Qin Qing to smoke a cigarette outside. He hadn't smoked for a long time. After smoking half a cigarette, he felt a little dizzy. However, it still felt good. How about it? Do you want to go and play tonight? Qin Qing poked him and asked. Oh yes, I haven't asked. What's the situation between you and my classmate? Rinpoche immediately thought of Dong Haiqing. What else could it be? Qin Qing spread his hands. I know she's your classmate. I sent her back that night and didn't even go upstairs. I'm most afraid of this kind of relationship. It's too troublesome. Where's Jiangnan? Let's have lunch together. I haven't seen her in a while since I've been running around. She should be at work. Let me make a call. After Qin Qing hung up the phone, he said to Rinpoche, she's at the company. Let's go together later. Are you going tonight? Qin Qing asked again. It's still more fun with you around. There's no point in going alone. Am I your only friend? Rinpoche asked with a smile. It should be easy for an influential person like Qin Qing to find someone to accompany him to go to the nightclub. You're the only one who can go out to drink and pick up girls. Qin Qing shrugged his shoulders. The two of them waited outside for a long time. When they saw Sun Qing and Su Shan coming out from the nightclub, they nodded at them. They went in to greet Papa Chun and went to look for Jiangnan. Papa Chun invited Rinpoche to stay for lunch. However, Rinpoche felt uncomfortable eating with him. He felt more comfortable eating with Qin Qing. After lunch, Qin Qing returned to the law firm. Rinpoche went to buy 2 sets of clothes and went online at home. Now that the black mud cream's formula was settled, he could finally relax. As long as he waited for the black mud cream to hit the market, he would be able to earn a lot of money. He didn't have to worry about his future. He took the time to make a call home. Naturally, he was nagged by his mother again. In the middle of the call, his father took over the phone and asked him about the company he was talking about. In the end, he told him to be careful and not to be cheated by others. At night, he went to the bar with Qin Qing. At least he didn't return empty-handed. The girl that night was young, but she was very wild. After tossing and turning for half the night, when Rinpoche woke up the next morning, his back was still sore. Looking at the snow-white shoulders that were exposed under the blanket, Rinpoche shook his head. Both parties had a purely physical relationship. Of course, they couldn't be tainted by unbearable feelings. Naturally, there was no need to communicate. He put on his clothes and prepared to go home to catch up on sleep. Chapter 44. After surfing the internet for 2 days, Rinpoche once again returned to that world. This time, he didn't bring anything with him. When he slept, he wasn't worried about leaving anything behind on Earth. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. He went out to see how the 2 little chaps were doing, but they weren't outside. There were bamboo leaves scattered on the ground and a puddle of water not far away. It seemed like they had just left. Rinpoche looked around and found the 2 little chaps outside a cage in the living area of the wild beasts. One of them was leaning on the cage and peering inside. The other one was rolling on the ground and continued to roll. Then it hit its head on a rock. Rinpoche almost laughed when he saw the guy sitting on the ground in a daze after knocking down the rock. These 2 little chaps had familiarized themselves with the surrounding environment over the past few days. In addition, it wasn't too hot this morning, so they came out to explore. The one that had been rolling was Gungun. It shook its head, ran behind Tian Tian, and bumped its butt, causing Tian Tian to tumble. The two pandas immediately rolled into a ball, following which the two chaps staggered and continued to explore. There was an extremely beautiful big bird in the cage just now, and it didn't pay attention to the two chaps. The two little chaps didn't go far before they became interested in another iron cage. Rinpoche had an impression of this cage. Inside were two rabbits that were as big as dogs and had mouths full of fangs. When the two chaps went over, the rabbit pounced on them and hit the iron cage. It made a gurgling sound from its throat, scaring the two chaps into a ball. Rinpoche then picked them up with each hand and walked back. When he returned to the entrance of the house, he put the two chaps there. In the end, Tian hugged Rinpoche's arm and didn't let go. It was as if it was glued to his arm. Gungun also hugged one of Rinpoche's legs and climbed up. Rinpoche managed to shake off the two chaps with great difficulty. After breakfast, he went to the fields to take a look. The 2 mu of land used for seasoning had already been plowed. A few odd-job workers had nothing to do, so they plowed the sweet potato field again. Seeing this situation, Rinpoche called for 2 people to follow him back to the house to get the Sichuan peppercorns, sesame seeds, cumin peppercorns, and sprouted sweet potatoes to prepare for planting. Rinpoche couldn't help much with the planting. Ever since he was young, he had never even touched a hoe. Rinpoche told them about the cultivation methods that he had seen on the internet. The 5 odd-job workers nodded their heads in agreement. They didn't expect that there were so many ways to cultivate. They looked at Rinpoche with admiration. As for the sweet potato, it was much simpler. This thing was very adaptable. It could dig a hole and bury it at a certain distance. In the first week, he had to water diligently to prevent the seedlings from dying. After the second week, it would be easier. Until the harvest, he only had to turn over the sweet potato vines a few times to prevent them from taking root. After settling these matters, Rinpoche dragged Tung Hulu and Tai Dao to the blacksmith shop in Baishur district to check on the progress of his fan. Shop owner. Rinpoche entered the shop and greeted the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper looked up at him and took out a wooden box from behind. Inside the box were the fan and the custom-made one that Rinpoche had brought. Take a look. The shop owner stuffed the fan into Rinpoche's hands. Rinpoche took a closer look. The fan blades were covered in layers of decorative patterns. It was obvious that they were forged with a hammer and looked rather beautiful. If the fan blades were to be sharpened, it could probably be used as a murder weapon. The bearing inside was also rather smooth. It seemed that there was no problem. Rinpoche took out a rubber ring from his bosom and attached it to a rope before pulling it. The fan started to spin as expected. Rinpoche's hand that was holding the fan trembled a little. It seemed that the roundness of the bearing was not enough. However, he was already very satisfied with the workmanship. Good craftsmanship. Rinpoche gave a thumbs up and said, "Of course, my craftsmanship is among the top 3 in the entire Baishur district." After hearing Rinpoche's praise, the shopkeeper immediately raised his head proudly. Rinpoche chuckled. "Just do as I said before and make another 20. The price is still 2 taels of silver each. How long will it take?" After hearing Rinpoche's words, the shopkeeper revealed a smile. After thinking for a while, he said, 10 days. The main problem is that the thing inside needs to be polished slowly. Rinpoche knew that the shopkeeper was talking about the bearing. 10 days was acceptable. He immediately paid the deposit and wrapped the 2 fans in cloth. Tung Hulu and Tai Dao each carried 1 fan. After leaving the blacksmith shop, they first went to Jinyuan Road to see how the most important shop was doing. When they arrived, they saw that the shop's door was wide open. 2 men were working inside. The bottom of the wall was covered with wooden planks. The top of the wall was covered with white ash. The floor was also covered with a layer of wooden flooring. There were also some chairs and wooden tables in the room. Everything was made of solid wood. All the wood was coated with a layer of sumac sap. It had a slightly pungent smell. However, this substance was completely environmentally friendly. Although the smell was a little pungent, it would dissipate in a few days. The coating of this layer of lacquer prevented the wood from rotting easily and also prevented it from attracting bugs. In this world, Only furniture makers would add color to the sumac sap. However, Rinpoche had completely retained the natural color of the wood. It looked fresh and natural, and it was comfortable to enter. After standing outside and looking around, Rinpoche did not go in. Instead, he brought the two of them back to the beast park. After putting down the things, Rinpoche pulled the carpenter Tong Jia into the beast park and whispered to him softly. Tong Jia was more than 8 meters tall. He had a shaved head and would bare his arms whenever he was free. His bronze-colored muscles were exposed, and he looked more like a thug than a carpenter. However, he was a carpenter in the beast park. His main job was to repair the houses and beast pens. His craftsmanship was not very good and was barely passable. However, Rinpoche had seen the things he made and felt that they were not bad. At least, this level of craftsmanship was not bad on Earth. Rinpoche pulled Tong Jia and gestured as he whispered to him for a long time. At first, Tong Jia was at a loss. When he knew that they were going to make a box, he immediately said, "This is easy." Then, they gathered a pile of wood and started sawing it to make a box. The others saw that the two of them were acting mysteriously and did not know what they were doing. The two of them spent the whole afternoon making a box with a thin wooden grid in front. They placed a fan in the box and stuck it. Then, they made another box and drilled a row of small holes at the bottom. Then, they put the cloth through the holes and fastened a button. Rinpoche put the box into the box and wiped his sweat. For the whole afternoon, Tong Jia worked with his bronze-colored muscles on his upper body. He kept giving instructions at the side and ended up exhausting himself. Looking at the weird thing that Rinpoche was making, Caretaker Sure came over and asked, "Brother Rin, what are you making?" Rinpoche was startled by the loud voice. He raised his head and saw that it was indeed Caretaker Sure. His voice was definitely gifted, and it was at the maximum level. "Wait a minute. I will show you something fun later." After hearing what Rinpoche said, Caretaker Sure smiled and waited at the side to see what Rinpoche was going to make. "You, Tung Hulu, go and get some ice from the ice house." "Tai Dao, go and get a bucket of water," Rinpoche shouted. After a while, the two of them returned. Rinpoche grabbed a handful of crushed ice and placed it in the box. Then he filled the box with water. The ice water started to drip down along the cloth. Rinpoche estimated that it was about time. He pulled Caretaker Sure to the front of the box and made it face the grid. "Wait here, I will start soon." He instructed Tai Dao to place a stool under the box and increase the height of the stool. He then stood beside the box, held the rope that was used to pull the fan, and pulled it up. Chapter 45. What's this? Caretaker Sure's eyes widened in surprise. "Air cooler," Rinpoche said. He pulled the rope a few more times and shouted, "Hulu, come and pull the rope." Then, he ran to the air cooler to enjoy the cool breeze. Tung Hulu imitated Rinpoche and pulled the rope before releasing it. The cool breeze immediately blew on Rinpoche's body, making him feel very comfortable. It was so comfortable to enjoy an air cooler in this world. Tong Jia also ran to Rinpoche's side. He wanted to try out the thing that he had been busy making for the whole afternoon. He squeezed slightly on Rinpoche's body and almost made him tumble. After Rinpoche stabilized himself, he glared at him. Tong Jia gave him a simple and honest smile. Rinpoche was so angry that he wanted to kick him. However, the cool breeze on such a hot day was too comfortable. He opened his arms and closed his eyes in satisfaction. Unfortunately, he did not enjoy it for long before the cool breeze disappeared. When he opened his eyes, Caretaker Sure was squatting in front of the box, trying to figure out how the cold breeze came out. The cold breeze blew on his face. How could it still reach Rinpoche, who was behind him? How can this thing blow out wind? Caretaker Sure asked as he looked into the box. Rinpoche thought about how to explain. After some thought, he simply said, "You won't understand even if I tell you. What do you think will happen if we sell this thing?" Rinpoche squatted beside Caretaker Sure and laughed. "It should be possible to sell it, right? But it's a little troublesome. Someone needs to pull the rope, right?" Caretaker Sure said with uncertainty. "It's not should, it's definitely," Rinpoche said with certainty. Caretaker Shi's business sense was too bad. However, this was normal. Most people in Dayo were like this. Do you remember that I mentioned selling ice? This thing is more effective than putting ice in the house. It cools down faster, Rinpoche said. It's such a good thing. It's better to send it to Her Majesty, Caretaker Shi said after some thought. It's a little too crude. Rinpoche naturally knew that he had to send one to the Empress first, but the one in front of him was really not presentable. Indeed, the box on the outside was made of wood that had just been sawed open. Although the woodworking skills of this world were quite good, and they were all connected with mortise and tenon joints, which would definitely attract a lot of rich people back on Earth, it still couldn't hide the crudeness of the box. In a modern world, everyone knew that the packaging had to be beautiful, classy, and classy. An item worth 100 renminbi had to be packaged with 100 renminbi to make it look like it was worth 1,000 renminbi. Although the main function of the air conditioner was the function of the air conditioner, if Rinpoche had a choice, he would rather have a $100 air conditioner with a $200 package. Can it create complex patterns? Rinpoche turned his head and asked Tongjia. I don't know. It depends on what it looks like. Tongjia rubbed the back of his head and answered honestly. Let me think about what pattern to make, Rinpoche said. Now that it was so simple and crude, there was no point in gifting it to the Empress. No matter what, it had to be done beautifully. Even if she was the Empress, a woman's nature wouldn't change, right? What is the nature of women? Glittering gold? Like the dragons? You can't move when you see shiny things? This was the first thought that crossed Rinpoche's mind. Soon after, he shook his head. After all, this was the Empress. No matter how poor Dayo was, the Empress wouldn't lack gold and gemstones. Furthermore, Dayo had a lot of gemstones. It was just that most of them were deep in the mountains and were difficult to excavate. Most of them were picked up in the open. In that case, what else could a woman like? Cute? If it was an ordinary woman, it might be possible. When he thought about how the Empress sent the polar bear flying with a slab, Rinpoche felt that it was impossible. After thinking for a while, Rinpoche couldn't figure out anything. He shook his head and decided not to think about this matter for now. He found a chef to cook a small meal for them. After that, Rinpoche returned to the house. There was no entertainment at night in this world. Other than making babies after dark, other than sleeping, Rinpoche was still not used to this kind of schedule. Since he couldn't fall asleep, he sat at the door and teased Gun and Tion. The two little chaps were originally lying on their backs on the ground. After he woke them up, they climbed onto his body. As a result, the two little chaps stopped moving when they climbed onto his knees. After taking a closer look, he realized that they had actually fallen asleep. Rinpoche had no choice but to look up at the starry sky. The starry sky in this world was still very beautiful. When he looked up, he could see countless stars. Among them, there were 2 starlight rivers and a huge disk. He wasn't sure if it was a nebula. This kind of starry sky was magnificent, and he was momentarily dazed. While looking at it, Rinpoche suddenly thought of an idea. If he were to take a picture of this starry sky and post it on the internet, would those netizens and astronomers go crazy? It was a pity that he didn't bring his cell phone. Another idea immediately popped up in his mind. If he were to put this starry sky on a box, it would definitely be magnificent. After thinking of this idea, he immediately couldn't sit still. He looked down and saw that the 2 little chaps were actually drooling all over him. He quickly put them down and ran to look for Tongjia. He thought that Tongjia had already fallen asleep. He didn't expect him to be smiling foolishly at the air cooler and pulling the rope with his hand. Come out, I have an idea. Rinpoche went forward and pulled Tongjia's arm, wanting to pull him up. In the end, he couldn't move him even after using all his strength. Tongjia turned his head and looked at Rinpoche with a silly smile. Rinpoche looked at that silly smile, clenched his teeth, and kicked Tongjia's leg. Get up and come out with me. Tongjia then got up and asked, Caretaker Rin, what's wrong? Come out first. Rinpoche called Tongjia out of the house, pointed to the starry sky above his head, and asked, Can you put this starry sky on the box? How? Tongjia was at a loss. Just carve it. I will think of a way to do the rest, Rinpoche said. Oh, it should be possible. I see these stars every day. I am very familiar with them, Tong Jia said with a simple and honest face. That's it then. Tomorrow, carve this starry sky on the box, especially these two galaxies and that circle. You must not burn them. Also, carve some stars that you're more familiar with. Okay, I can do this, Tong Jia immediately said. Is one day enough? Yes, it won't even take one day. All right, you should settle this matter tomorrow. Do I need to draw it first? Rinpoche asked. No need, it's all in my head. Rinpoche didn't say anything else after hearing what Tong Jia said. He hummed a tune and went back to his house to sleep. The next morning, Rinpoche went to look for Tong Jia with a biscuit in his mouth. He sat beside Tong Jia and watched him dismantle the box and carve the starry sky on a few surfaces. Rinpoche took out the air cooler and placed it on his knees. He pulled the rope from time to time. In the afternoon, Tong Jia raised his head and shouted, "Caretaker run, it's done." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.